Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku became Guts and fell for Ibara? Part 1. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is Black Bunny by ArcfUA. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Far away from the stadium, in fact, on the other side of the world, in the United States, Guts swung his blade at a group of Nomu, cutting them all in half with a single swing, killing them with ease. Guts put the Dragonslayer on his shoulder and noted that these Nomu were rather weak, as if they were just here to distract him. Why are they here? Guts asked himself. AFO is still focused on Japan, and him coming to the US is dangerous for him as well as for the other four. He has no allies here and no resources either, and the government itself has been preparing for him to show himself, and of course, she is here as well. Wait a minute. Don't tell me he's trying to. However, before he could finish that thought, something landed right in front of him, and when the dust cleared, he saw a more muscular Nomu, that looked like he was built to destroy a tank. Guts grits his teeth and gripped the Dragonslayer tighter and prepares to fight once more. However, he hoped that his theory of why AFO's lackeys were here was wrong, but knowing his luck, it was exactly why they were here. He only hoped he had time to warn her or stop them in time. Once the two boys were on stage, Mike's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, put your hands together for our fighters," Mike announced. The crowd cheered as the two boys eyed each other. Todoroki's face remained blank, but Izuku still had a smirk on his face. On one side we have the son of the number 2 himself, Shoto Todoroki. Todoroki TSKED, great, now everyone knows who I am, Todoroki thought to himself. And on the other side is UA's very own black swordsman, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku's smirk grew. Black swordsman, huh? That's got a nice ring to it, Izuku thought. Midnight looked over the stage from her podium and smiled. Are both Constants ready? Todoroki nodded. Izuku nodded as well. Midnight gave a quick nod. Very well, then let the fight. Midnight began. Izuku prepared himself for any of Todoroki's moves, and Todoroki was prepared to trap him in his ice. Both boys were prepared to fight. Both boys had their pains. Both boys wanted to win because they both had something to prove. But one had more to lose. Begin. Once those words left Midnight's mouth, the entire arena thought how quick this match was going to be, as they assumed Izuku would be trapped in the ice much like Zero. However, once those words were said, Izuku's hand was shown as he threw 5 bombs. All were already lit, and all of them directly at Todoroki. Once the dual quirk user saw them, he put up a wall of ice, protecting him from the explosions. Those bombs of his were already lit. Did he do it when Midnight was starting the match? Todoroki asked himself. However, the wall in front of him exploded due to another bomb, and appearing out of the mist was Izuku, his sword ready to knock Todoroki to the ground. However, Todoroki quickly activated his quirk and shot up some ice toward Izuku. Seeing the attack, Izuku switched up and swung the edge of his blade through the incoming ice, breaking it. Once the sword wielder landed, he charged at Todoroki once more. However, the 1A students created a floor of ice around Izuku, which he used to dodge and maneuver around the young forest-haired teen. Now that he was behind the green-haired teen, Todoroki launched another barrage of ice at his opponent. However, Izuku turned around, saw the incoming attack, and jumped out of the way. However, some of the ice managed to hit him on the right side and even tearing his cloak, but he landed away from the majority attack. However, his luck did not change, as once he landed, his right foot had slipped and twisted, sending pain through Izuku's entire right leg. Izuku growled at the pain but pushed through it and continued the fight. Izuku charged at the red and white-haired teen, and as he did, he reached into his pouch and pulled out another bomb, dragging the wick across the ground and lighting it, and quickly throwing it at Todoroki, who quickly formed a small wall of ice in front of him, which blocked the explosion but also was destroyed in the process. Only a few seconds after the ice wall broke, Izuku shot through the smoke and swung the flat end at Todoroki, hitting the boy and causing him to fly across the stage, but Todoroki stopped himself by forming ice behind him, catching him and stopping him from going out of bounds, much to Izuku's disappointment. Todoroki regained himself and looked over to Izuku, his face still rather emotionless. I gotta admit, for someone without a quirk, you can still put up one hell of a fight, Todoroki told Izuku. Izuku smiled. Don't underestimate me, Izuku told him. Todoroki nodded. You've got a lot of fight in you, but why do you fight? Izuku looked at him with a confused expression. Huh? Izuku asked. Todoroki looked at him. I just want to know why you fight, Todoroki told Izuku. Is it because you want to prove people wrong? That a quirkless person can become a hero? Or are you fighting for something deeper? He asked. However, Izuku didn't respond with words, instead, responded by trying to hit Todoroki right after he finished his sentence, and he did manage to strike the dual-haired teen, sending him to the side, tumbling across the stage. Todoroki got up slowly, wincing in pain. However, before he could get up fully, Izuku kicked him in the side, knocking the wind out of him and causing Todoroki to fall back down. Izuku looked down at him. We're in the middle of a fight. You want to talk and blabber on and on about bullshit? Join the Hero Public Safety Commission, Izuku told him with a smile. Otherwise, shut up and fucking fight. Izuku tightened his grip on Apollyon and then slammed the flat end of his sword over Todoroki's body, causing the other teen to cry out in pain. Izuku pulled the sword up again, ready to bring it back down on Todoroki again. However, before Izuku could slam his sword down again, Todoroki quickly created ice between him and Izuku, allowing him to escape. Izuku smiled and quickly cut the ice in half. Unfortunately for Izuku, Todoroki ran low and appeared on his left side and creating a short pillar of ice, hitting Izuku in the rib, and when Izuku felt the impact, he also felt one of his ribs crack, and the green-haired teen flew up before falling back down. On the ground, Izuku coughed out some blood and breathed heavily. Damn it, first my foot and now my rib, Izuku thought. I need to end this quickly. Izuku finished the thought. Izuku got up and glared at Todoroki with his one good eye, and anger began to take control over Izuku. Todoroki glared right back, but as he did, Izuku noticed he was slightly shivering. Shoto. What are you doing? Finish him off. Both boys turned their heads to see Endeavor watching the fight and an angry expression on his face. Show them that you're better than them. Show them why I made you. Endeavor cried. It looks like Endeavor is giving his son some words of encouragement, Mike said over the intercom. Izuku chuckled as he looked at Todoroki. Seems like Daddy wants you to finish me off. Must be great having him as a father, huh? Izuku asked. Todoroki quickly looked back at Izuku with a glare. You have no idea what you're talking about, Todoroki cried in anger. Izuku just kept smiling at him, noticing he had touched a nerve, and his smile grew sinister and he decided to keep pushing the sore subject. Oh come on, must be great having such a wonderful hero for a father. You probably grew up rich. Spoiled. I can only imagine the wonderful life you had, Izuku said with a faux smile. Todoroki growled and fired 2 pillars of ice at Izuku, and Izuku smiled as he charged forward. The 2 pillars traveled so fast that one grazed his cheek and the other grazed the right side of his torso, before getting right in front of Todoroki and smacked him with the sword. Todoroki was sent back but once again stopped himself by forming ice behind him. However, just as he stopped himself, one of Izuku's bombs landed right in front of him. Todoroki's eyes widened with shock and he looked at Izuku, who just flipped him off. The bomb exploded and blew Todoroki back. The force of the explosion weakened the dual-haired teen, however, he was still not out of bounds. Seeing his son being so easily dispatched by someone who was powerless and weaker than him, made Endeavor's blood boil. Get up, Shoto. Get up and use your flames, Endeavor cried. How can you lose to him? Someone who possesses no power. How can you be beaten by a freak of nature like him? Endeavor cried. Todoroki slowly got up, but he felt pain all over his body due to the force of the explosion, and he growled in anger. Shut up. You old bastard, Todoroki muttered as he got up. However, Todoroki was hoisted up by the back of his shirt by Izuku, and once he was back on his feet, Izuku, without his sword, punched him in the gut, causing Todoroki to heel over. Izuku wasn't finished and began beating Todoroki with his fist more, delivering left and right hooks to the other boy's face. Meanwhile, Izuku was laughing the whole time. Ha 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 ha. Come on. Where's that power your father was boasting to me about? He said you were going to take me out with ease. Yet here you are. Being beaten by a damn quirkless freak. Huh? Izuku taunted. Endeavor. Are you watching? Izuku asked with a devilish smile, still laughing as he beat Todoroki. Todoroki staggered backward, too dazed and in too much pain to do anything. He was then punched once more in the left side of his face before another punch was delivered to his right. He felt as if he was going to fall backward, but before he could do that, Izuku grabbed the front of his gym uniform and Izuku looked at the dazed and beaten boy, still smiling like a psychopath. "Ah, come on now. Don't wanna make daddy disappointed, do ya?" Izuku asked with glee as he pulled his fist back. Izuku then punched Todoroki square in the face, breaking his nose and finally sending Todoroki down to the ground. In every aspect, Izuku had won the match, but he wasn't over. He still wanted to rub salt in the wound of a certain hero. After all, he had a promise to keep. Izuku walked over to Todoroki, grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, and dragged him toward the side of the stage that faced Endeavor, dropped him back on the stage, flipped him over, and picked up Todoroki by his hair and made Todoroki face his father as blood steamed down from his nose, and Izuku smiled wickedly at the number 2 hero. "Look at how pathetic the spawn of the number 2 is. He's just like his father. WHO won't ever be as great as the great All Might. Ha 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 ha," Izuku cried out. Endeavor's anger skyrocketed as his flames burned brighter and obscured his face and without thinking launched toward Izuku. Izuku smiled as he saw the number 2 hero shooting toward him. However, he was stopped when All Might himself appeared in between the two, causing Endeavor to halt. "That's enough, Endeavor," All Might told him with a stern face. "This is unbecoming of the number 2. Endeavor grits his teeth as he glared with fury at All Might. "Get out of my way, the boy insulted me," Endeavor cried. "He disrespected everything I worked so hard for." All Might glared right back at him. "Are you forgetting where you are?" All Might asked. "The whole world is watching. Think about what this can do to your reputation," All Might told him. Izuku chuckled. "Ah, come on All Might, let him through. Then the world will really see what the number 2 is really like," Izuku said, egging the flame hero on. All Might turned around and looked at Izuku. His stern expression remained on his face. "Young Midoriya, do not egg him on. You have already caused enough trouble for everyone," he told him. Izuku's smile disappeared as he looked annoyed by All Might's words. "Tisk," he said as he looked away, and then to Midnight. "Hey, do I win or what?" he asked. Midnight was a bit shocked at the events that had happened before her, but when she heard Izuku talking to her, she snapped out of her thoughts and nodded, clearing her throat and turning to the crowd. "Shoto Todoroki is down for the count. Izuku Midoriya wins and advances to the next stage," Midnight announced. Suddenly, the crowd erupted with anger, booing Izuku as he exited the stage. Izuku just smiled the entire time he left, even when the audience began throwing trash and food at him. "You ain't no hero, freaking psycho. You don't deserve to move on. Freak. UA. What were you thinking? Letting someone as CEAZY as him into your school? Monster." Izuku didn't care what they said. He kept walking before finally out of sight of the audience. He collapsed against the wall and finally let out ragged breaths as a pained expression graces his face as he looked to the ground. "Izuku. Bro." Izuku looked up to see Mei and Tetsu running toward him. Mei had the biggest worried expression he had seen on her face since he had seen her at the hospital. Izuku tried to walk forward, but the pain of his foot and rib shot through him and he fell to his knees, groaning loudly with pain. Mei rushed to his side and kneeled next to him. "Are you okay?" she asked with worry. Izuku continued to let out heavy breaths, but he nodded. "Just a twisted ankle and a broken rib," he replied, catching his breath. "Nothing the old lady can't fix," he said. Mei nodded and picked up by putting his arm over his shoulder, and then he was picked up on his other side by Tetsu. Izuku turned to him with a raised brow. "What are you doing here?" Izuku asked him. Tetsu turned his head toward him and smiled. "Geez bro, did you already forget who your best bro was?" Tetsu asked him. Izuku looked away from him and looked forward. "I told you, we aren't friends," Izuku told him. Tetsu just chuckled and rolled his eyes. "Sure, whatever you say, man, after all, who helps you train during lunch?" Izuku began to get annoyed by Tetsu, but Mei giggled and Izuku turned to her. "What's so funny?" he asked her with a raised brow. Mei shrugged and turned to him with a smile. He kind of reminds me of Kimihito." Izuku's eyes widened a bit as he saw Mei smile, and for a second he felt as if he was back in the old days. However, he felt a twinge of pain remembering the past, and he hung his head low as Mei and Tetsu took him into the infirmary, where Recovery Girl was already waiting for him. She raised her cane and smoked atop the head. You fool. How many times have I told you not to be so damn reckless, she cried. Izuku winced in pain and glared at the woman. It's not my fault, ya old hag. Besides, it's not like I want to see your old ass all the time either, he cried. Recovery girl HMPHED and looked at him. Oh. And who else is going to heal those wounds of yours? She asked. Izuku growled at her, but she told the other two students to set him over on one of the cots, which they did. Izuku then laid down and waited for Recovery Girl. The two said they were going to go and watch the next fight and said their goodbyes. As they began to leave, before they could exit the room, they were stopped by Izuku calling out to them. Hey, he said. Mei and Tetsu turned around to look at him and Izuku was just staring at the ceiling. Thanks. He told them. Tetsu was surprised and Mei smiled, and then the two left the room and walked down the hall. As they walked, Tetsu was still surprised that Izuku had thanked him as he turned to Mei. Wow, he never said that before. Was I dreaming that? He asked with a smile. Mei chuckled as she turned to him. He's not that bad when you know him, I promise, she told him. I don't think we've met. I'm Mei Hatsume, Mei told him. Tetsu smiled at her. Tetsu. Nice to meet ya, he said cheerfully. Mei chuckled a bit at his name but then decided to continue the conversation. Are you in the same class as Izuku? She asked. He nodded. Yep. He said. How do you know him? He asked. We're old friends, Mei replied, not explaining anything more than that. I didn't know he had any friends. What with? You know. Tetsu began. Mei knew what he was talking about and a soft smile formed on her lips as she looked to the ground. He wasn't always like that. He's been through a lot, she said solemnly. Knowing what she was talking about, he nodded in agreement. Yeah, he said. Mei then looked back at him. I hope he hasn't been too much trouble, she said. Tetsu smiled. PSSH. Him? Trouble? Not at all, he joked. Mei chuckled at his joke and smiled at the silver-haired teen. Well, if it means anything, thank you for being his friend, she told him. Tetsu felt a little bashful and rubbed the back of his head. Hey, don't mention it, he said cheerfully. Back in the infirmary, right after Tetsu and Mei had left, they had brought in Todoroki, and Recovery Girl looked him over and didn't say a word. She simply looked over to Izuku as he was getting ready to leave. She already knew this was his work and let out a sigh. Why do the youth have to be so troublesome? She asked herself as she healed Todoroki. Izuku grabbed his things and then left the infirmary despite the small protest from Recovery Girl that he needed to rest, paid her no mind, and left the infirmary. Quiet a fight you had out there, young man. Hearing that voice, Izuku turned around only to see a tall and petite woman with a wooden staff, and oddly enough, her attire resembled what one would assume a witch would wear, even had a pointed hat. Izuku was confused as to who she was. Do I know you? He asked. The woman smiled. Not exactly, but we have a mutual friend, she told him. Izuku was still confused and began to grow suspicious of the woman. Who are you? Izuku asked. The woman continued to softly smile at him and turned to walk away. I'm a friend, Izuku Midoriya, and we'll be formally introduced soon, she told him. I just wanted to see the boy that man set upon the same hellish path as him. Hearing that, Izuku's mind quickly went to Guts and he looked back at the woman, going to ask her how she knew Guts. However, when he looked back, she wasn't there anymore. Izuku looked around the hallway rapidly but didn't see the woman anywhere. Who the hell was she? He asked himself. Izuku managed to get back to his class seating, and once he got there, he looked at his classmates to see them looking back at him with uneasy and frightened looks, and Izuku didn't pay them any mind. However, the last person he expected called out to him. Midoriya, you okay? Izuku turned to see Itsuka standing in front of him with a raised brow. Izuku just looked at her and remained in his cold demeanor. I'm alive, aren't I? Izuku told her. Itsuka wasn't fazed by his rudeness and smiled at him. Good to know. After all, we're counting on you or Abara to win this thing, he said. Izuku just looked at her for a few moments before he decided to ask what he had missed. Itsuka told him about the other fights that he missed and also revealed that they were going into a break but already revealed the next round of fights. Izuku looked to the board only to see the next two rounds before the final round where the winner was decided. Round 1. Izuku Midoriya vs Abara Shiozaki. Round 2. Katsuki Bakugo vs Yaoyorozu Momo. Izuku grimaced at the rounds. Damn, this is only going to make things worse for me, Izuku thought. He looked over to Abara sitting by Setsuna and Pony, and he saw her glaring at him before turning away. Izuku really hated his luck. He was going to have to fight someone who hated him and whose quirk was more dangerous than Todoroki's in a way. And worse, if he beat her, he was going to have to fight another person who hated him and was much more powerful and destructive than both her and Todoroki. Tisk. Damn my luck, Izuku thought once more. Far up in the audience, the woman who Izuku had met in the hallways was sitting in her chair. However, her eyes opened slowly as if she was sleeping, but once her eyes opened, they immediately found Izuku sitting next to Tetsu and a soft smile graced her lips and let out a sigh. How the past repeats itself, she said. ... Back in the secret base, All for One had left the base, leaving only Stain and Garaki in the mountain base, with the fifth member of what AFO called the God Hand, in the pod, still in stasis. Stain looked at Garaki. Why can't we wake him yet? He asked. Garaki looked at him. His body isn't completely ready yet. Us God Hand members are special, he said. You see, we have multiple quirks, almost as many as All for One. However, in order to achieve such a state, our body needs to absorb a lot of organic matter as to not suffer from the effects of quirk singularity. Stain raised a brow in confusion. Quirk singularity? He asked. Garaki nodded. It's a theory I came up with 70 years ago, he told Stain. As the generations follow one another, quirks blend and evolve, producing stronger and more complex quirks. However, with this increase in power, the quirks will also become more difficult to control since the human body doesn't evolve quickly enough to keep up. Eventually, there will come a point when quirks will become too overpowered and complicated, and no one will be able to control them anymore. Stain was not a person for scientific things, but he would admit how the theory did hold merit. After all, All Might and some of the most powerful heroes in the world were examples of quirks growing stronger than in previous generations. So, how were you able to stop this singularity? Stain asked. Garaki smiled sinisterly. While he would usually like to talk about how he solved the quirk singularity problem, he knew that Stain wouldn't understand and the process was still a little secret that only he and AFO knew. Oh, it's a very difficult process, but let us just say that we need a lot of mutant types, he said sinisterly. Stain was annoyed that the old doctor would tell him how the process was. While he most likely wouldn't understand it, it would still be good to know. So, is that my job for now? Gather as many mutant types as I can for now. Garaki nodded. But don't kill them, I need them alive, Garaki told him. Understand? Stain nodded. Garaki nodded back and then smiled. But before that, it's time for you to become a Nomu, but not just any Nomu. Garaki began. You'll be one of the most powerful high-end Nomu we've ever created, he told him. Stain just nodded once again. Just get this over with, Stain told him. Garaki nodded and led Stain to his lab, but Garaki turned back to look at the fifth in the pod and smiled. Once we get what you need, and once to wake up from whatever dream you're having, no one will be able to stop you. We just need one more quirk in the US, and then, no one will be able to stop you. Even All Might himself, Garaki thought, silently laughing to himself. Izuku waited on stage for his next fight against his own classmate, a classmate who absolutely hates him and if he could guess, would want to see him dead, much like Bakugo. However, he still had enough bombs to blow her vines away, and from what he remembered, from watching her fight in the other hero exercises, she never moved, relying on her vines to defend and attack, meaning if he was able to blow or dodge her vines he could get in close and hit her. Damn my luck. First Todoroki and his damn ass of a dad and now her, and if I make it through this I have to fight Bakugo, Izuku thought with a grimace. Nothing's ever easy, is it? He asked. Eventually, Abara arrived on stage and Mike announced who they were to the audience. Of course, they cheered for Abara, but booed him. Once again though, he didn't care. He wasn't here for their approval, he was doing this because it would bring him closer to his goal. Closer to getting to those five and killing them, killing him most of all. Even just thinking about Monoma and the rest of them sent a surge of fury through him. He was so angry that he didn't hear Midnight say begin, and was only when he saw vines rush at him. He quickly jumped out of the way, and grabbed one bomb, lit it and threw it at her vines, blowing them up and sending bits of the vine everywhere. Abara shielded herself, and Izuku saw this and rushed at her. However, as he got close, the ground in front of him burst open and a clump of vines shot toward him. Izuku quickly put his sword in front of him to block the vines, but the force of the vines sent him flying upward into the air. As he was in the air, 2 vines wrapped around his legs and pulled him back down on stage hard. Thankfully nothing was broken, but he quickly cut the vines off and got up, and once he got up, he quickly grabbed one of his bombs and threw it at the bundle of vines, blowing them up. Izuku growled, "Son of a bitch, this is already getting hard," Izuku said. Izuku pulled out another bomb, but before he could light it, one of Abara's vines struck his hand like a whip, causing Izuku to wince in pain as his hand bled. Some thorns had also pierced his skin. Abara's vines wiggles around her and then they swung at Izuku. Izuku quickly picked up his sword and managed to deflect some of them. However, some of the vines struck him and tore through his jacket, cutting him in the process. The whole time, Abara glared at Izuku as she used her vines to whip him, and all he could do was try to defend himself. Her vines hit him almost every second, making it impossible for him to even try to reach for one of his bombs. Abara wanted him to suffer, to bleed, to pay for what he had done to her, what he reminded her of. As her vines whipped him and tore his gym jacket to shreds, eventually, the jacket was quickly torn off of him, exposing his upper body to the whole world. Abara got a clear view of his torso and she saw the cuts she was giving him, but also the old scars he had from previous fights. However, Abara didn't care about those old wounds, she cared about the new ones, the ones she was giving him. Abara couldn't help but smile gleefully as she saw the blood from the small wounds seeping from his body. This was her revenge for what he did for her, but she could not deny what was happening to her body. I feel, she thought as she continued watching her vines whip the forest-haired teen, I feel so warm. My entire body is heating up. All of this, is so fucking exciting. She began to think as to why did Izuku acting like a beast turn her on? Why did hurting him turn her on? Was she crazy, insane, sick in the head? Why? Suddenly, an image of a middle school boy yelling at her popped into her mind. The memory of him hit her hard and her eyes widened with a realization. Ah, I remember now, I remember how I discovered this side of myself, Abara thought. Abara sat at her desk alone and shy as it was her first day of middle school. As she sat alone, she was nervous as it felt like everyone was looking at her. She just hoped that this new school was going to make things better. After all, things were not going so well for her at home. Suddenly, a boy walked over to her desk and bent down in front of her, and looked at her. I'm Josuke Todoroki, nice to meet you, he said with a kind smile. Abara smiled softly back at him. I Abara Shiozaki, it's a pleasure to meet you, Todoroki, Abara replied. Josuke smiled and shook his head. Please, just call me Josuke, we're gonna be friends after all, he told her. Abara smiled at him and nodded. Thank you, Josuke, she said. Abara fell to the ground as one of the school's many delinquents struck her with his backhand after she blew him off when he tried to flirt. Abara looked up in fright as the delinquent walked over to her to do God knows what, but before he could take another step, he was punched in the face by Josuke. Get back, you son of a bitch! Josuke cried. The two began to fight and things got so bad that they were spitting out blood. All Abara could do was watch, and as she watched Josuke protect her, a switch inside of her was flipped. Something about seeing the animalistic rage in her friend as he beat the other teen in order to protect her. It made her feel warm. Abara smiled as she watched Josuke fight like an animal. She loved it. This feeling inside of her. She wanted more. She wanted to feel more of this warmth. Her need to feel the warmth, the pleasure she felt, led to her starting trouble and telling Josuke, even though the delinquents did nothing, she would lie to Josuke and a fight would break out. She would simply stand by and watch the fight, as her body grew hot and dampness would grow between her thighs. She believed that she was in love with him. One day as she was walking back to class, Josuke appeared and she gave him a smile and a wave, but he just grabbed her by the wrist and dragged her away to some secluded area of the school. Josuke, what are you? However, she didn't finish her sentence as Josuke slapped her, stunning her into silence. A tingle went down her body. The boy glared at her. Is it true that you've just been saying those guys have been bothering you just to start shit? He asked. Abara nodded slowly in response. Josuke was actually shocked and confused, and that quickly turned into anger. Why? He asked. Abara didn't respond, simply remaining silent. Josuke's anger rose and he pushed her against the wall and glared at her. Why damn it? He asked. However, instead of a verbal response, Abara simply crashed her lips into his. Josuke was shocked by the sudden kiss and he pulled away, but Abara wrapped her arms around his neck and looked at him with hazy eyes. Because I love you, Abara said with a smile. I love it when I see you go absolutely crazy. It makes me warm, it makes me hot, and I can't help it. Seeing you protect me, fight and get bloody just to protect me. I want you to break me, Josuke, break me and make me yours, Abara said in a husky voice. Josuke was in shock and he quickly broke away from Abara and looked at her with a horrified expression. You're fucking crazy, Abara. You cause all of this for what? So you can fucking get off to people being beaten to a bloody pulp? He cried. I've had enough. You're a fucking freak. A damn freak, Abara. Hearing those words, everything went cold. Abara froze in shock. What? She asked. Josuke didn't say another word and just walked away. However, Abara chased after him, her hand out trying to grab him, but she tripped over her foot and fell to the floor. Tears then began to stream down her face, and after that, their friendship was over, and eventually, in the middle of their first year, Josuke left, and when he did, Abara felt crushed. She felt alone, a feeling she didn't want to feel again. Abara arrived home only for her mother to be waiting for her, and her face was emotionless. It always was. Abara's mother, Akina Shiozaki, was a cold and calculated businesswoman, who held a high position in the Hero Public Safety Commission. Akina had long hair that resembled bark, her eyes were sharp and green, she wore the typical uniform of someone who worked at the HPSC, a white dress shirt with a black tie, over that was a black blazer, and she wore a tight black tube skirt with white leggings and a pair of black heels. Abara froze up as she looked at her mother. Mother. Abara was cut off from saying more as her mother raised up her hand to stop her and then put it down. She looked at her daughter, still emotionless. The school called me. There are apparently rumors flying about you causing trouble with a boy, Akina told her. Are these rumors true? Abara wanted to speak but the words wouldn't come out, she was scared stiff. Well, Akina asked. Mother, Akina closed her eyes and let out a long sigh and once again stopped her daughter from talking and then opened her eyes to look at her daughter once more. Go to your room, I don't want your excuses, you are grounded, she said. I wish you were more like your brother, Akina muttered. Abara, however, heard her mother and felt a blow to her heart, but she nodded. Yes, mother, Abara said and walked to her room. Once inside her room, Abara dropped her bag and fell to her knees sobbing to herself. One night, Abara could not sleep, she was restless, rolling around under her blanket. She had not felt the same for a while, not since Josuke had left. She didn't cause any more fights and that warm feeling was gone. She tried to feel it again, she tried to imagine it, and it did make her wet, but she could never truly get off, it didn't feel the same way. She needed to see it, to hear it. So she looked online and found some videos similar to what she was into. Women tied down and spanked with whips or paddles, the men were always dominant and demanding, like wild beasts as they pounded the woman. She loved seeing it, she loved how the men were like savages, and the women enjoyed the pain, their eyes rolling in the back of their heads, their tongues hanging out with a slutty smiles. But even that wasn't enough, she realized she couldn't just see and hear it anymore, she wanted to feel it. She needed to feel it. She twirled her hair and she almost poked herself with one of her vine's thorns, but she then stopped and looked at her vine and saw the thorns. She pressed her finger on the thorn and pressed it so hard that she pricked her finger and saw a single drop of blood fall down her finger. Finally, feeling the pain and seeing the blood, the warm feeling returned and she smiled, but the pain was not enough, she wanted much bigger pain, and she grabbed more of her vines and looked at the thorns, and a lustful smile formed on her face. She moved her vines away from her back, only leaving a few dangling from behind. She then activated her quirk, and the vines still behind her rose up before lashing her in the back. The pain was intense but she loved it. To her, it was bliss, the most beautiful and amazing thing she had ever felt. Slowly, she slid her hands underneath her panties and she could feel how wet she was, and she continued using her vines to inflict more pain on her back and slipped her fingers inside of herself. As she inflicted the pain upon herself, she did not see herself, but imagined it was Josuke behind her, and the thought of him in a blind fury being the one to inflict the pain made the warmth inside of her grew. Josuke, Abara moaned as her fingers explored deeper inside and the vines struck her again and again. Please, please destroy me, she moaned once more. Finally, the overwhelming pleasure of the pain in her fantasy of her ex-friend hit the point, and she finished. Her breath was ragged and heavy, and she pulled her fingers out of her wet crevice and looked at her hand, and it was only then had she realized what her fantasies were about, and her mind finally came back down to earth, only for her to ball up her hand in a fist and begin to cry. She felt disgusted with herself, utterly disgusting and ashamed of what her thoughts were, and her sobbing increased. At his moment, she felt that Josuke was right, that she was sick in the head, a pervert with the sickest of fantasies. I really am a freak, she told herself through her sobbing. Eventually, she had buried those emotions deep within herself, ashamed of such thoughts and fantasies. After a while, she managed to resist her urges by focusing on becoming a hero and trying to get into UA. And with the help of Awase, who she met during her second year, she buried her feelings deep within her. However, they have resurfaced thanks to him. Thinking back to when those feelings resurfaced, her anger grew, because he brought back the urges, the feelings, the fantasies, the pleasure. She hated him for bringing back what she hated about herself. Abara stopped her vines from continuing to whip Izuku, and Izuku looked at her only for two of her vines to snake around his legs, tripping him and pulling him toward her. Once Izuku was in front of her, she walked over to him and stood over him. Abara looked down at him with a blank expression. I despise you, she told him, you made me feel these urges once more. That is unforgivable, she told him. Izuku smiled, and he then used his free hand to slap her, and Abara was shocked for a few seconds, because she felt the warmth inside of her grow, and because she was caught up in the feeling. Izuku cut himself loose and backed away quickly, and lit one of his bombs and threw it at her. Abara snapped out of her thoughts when she saw the bomb and shielded herself with her vines, but when it exploded, Abara was blown away, but not out of bounds. Abara got up slowly, still a bit dazed and confused, but she looked in the direction of Izuku, but all she saw was smoke. But then Izuku burst through it, and when Abara saw him, it was like he was a demon, covered in scars and bursting out of the smoke. He swung her sword at her, hitting her and sending her to her right across the stage. Izuku then rushed after her and jumped up, preparing to bring the sword down on her, but Abara rolled out of the way, and then quickly got up only to look at Izuku, and her eyes widened. His entire chest was bloody and covered in fresh cuts, he was breathing heavily and he had this feral look in his eyes and face. Abara felt the warmth grow much larger this time and she felt a dampness grow between her legs. Izuku was getting closer to her and she felt warmer and then she smiled and a slight blush appeared on her face. I'm scared, but this warmth, this heat, it feels so great, Abara thought. I want him. I want him to kiss me. I want him to destroy me, Abara thought, her smile growing wider. However, she was snapped out of such thoughts when she realized Izuku now stood in front of her, his sword resting on his shoulder, and she then looked around to see the crowd of people watching the fight, and shame and humiliation quickly filled her entire body. Realizing what she was thinking in the middle of a fight, she felt disgusted and revolted with herself and she quickly curled up into a ball and muttered something. Izuku looked down at her with a raised brow. What? He asked. I said I give up, Abara yelled. Izuku was surprised but just smiled at her and Abara glared at him, but Midnight declared it his win and the crowd did as they did before, booed and threw trash and food at him. He didn't mind, and for the second time that day, he walked over to the infirmary to get healed. Abara watched as he left, so many emotions swirled inside of her and she got up off the stage and followed after him. In the infirmary, Recovery had finished wrapping Izuku's chest and arms in bandages. As she finished, she let out a long sigh and looked at the clock, before telling him that he'd better not get hurt again as she was going on her lunch break. Izuku simply rolled his eyes and watched as she left. After Recovery Girl left, Izuku was a bit pissed that his jacket and his cloak were ripped apart, but he could get another jacket and maybe make him a new cloak with a few added features. Now that he thought about it, he too could ask her to help make him some new gear and some better armor. He reached for Apollyon and set the blade on his shoulder and turned around to leave only for the infirmary door to open, and at first, he assumed it was Recovery Girl, but it wasn't her. It was Abara. Izuku was confused as to why she was here and she could see her face as she was looking down and her vines obscured her face. "Why are you here?" he asked. Instead of the verbal lashing he was expecting from the girl, she ran over and tackled him, causing him to fall on his back with her atop of him. Izuku growled in pain due to his back still being in a lot of pain thanks to the girl on top of him now, and he looked at her with a furious glare. "What the fuck is your?" he began. Abara stopped him from continuing his question by smashing her lips into his, shocking him, his eyes growing wide. The kiss lasted a good long minute before Abara tried to slip her tongue into his mouth, and that took him out of his shock. He broke the kiss, and turned her over with him now on top of her, breathing heavily. Looking up at him, Abara smiled with lust and rubbed her thighs together, as the warmth filled her body again, and this time, the feeling was so intense that she felt like she was burning up from the inside. "You're a beast who only wishes to dominate and destroy," she whispered to him in a husky tone, her smile growing. "So dominate me. Destroy me. Be that beast with me," she said, still in a whisper. Izuku was shocked by what she was saying, and he too could feel something rising inside of him. It was a mix of his hormones, but also something darker. Abara kept smiling and saw that he looked hesitant, but she couldn't wait any longer. The heat inside her was so intense, she was burning up. She didn't care about anything else besides her wanting him to dominate her. So, she went for the jacket's zipper and slowly pulled it down, and Izuku's attention went down to her chest as she unzipped her jacket, and once it was open, Izuku saw the inner sides of her boobs and he could not take his eyes away from what she was offering him. Abara then wrapped her arms around the back of Izuku's neck and brought him closer to her, her mouth close to his ear. "Do it," she whispered. "Destroy me, Izuku, show me the beast you are." Abara whispered into his ear, her tone full of lust. "Do it, take her and destroy her. She wants it, you want it, do it, let go, give in to your hunger, give in to your lust, let go and just give in." The voice that spoke inside of his head was dark, deep, and disembodied, but it had a certain control over Izuku, and in a split second, he didn't see Abara anymore, as an image formed in his head. In his mind, he saw a black bunny, that was very skinny, almost as if it was starved. It had red eyes and it stood over Abara, digging its teeth into her neck as it stared back at Izuku. "Destroy her, dominate her, she wants you to do it. You want to do it," the bunny cried, so starved for connection. "She's offering herself. Give in and dominate her," the bunny cried. However, the image disappeared, and when it did, Izuku felt he was in a daze as he looked down at Abara, only to see her breathing heavily and letting out a few moans with her eyes closed, and her jacket was now fully open, exposing her breast to him, but he didn't care about that, as his eyes focused on a small bite mark into her neck, and his eyes widened with fear as he quickly got up, grabbed Apollyon, and left the infirmary, terrified of the realization of what he had just done. "Wah, what the hell did I do?" Izuku asked himself as he walked down the hallway. "Did I really do it? Was it me? Was it that bunny? What the fuck was that?" he asked himself again. "That's what you wanted." Izuku looked up to see the black bunny, which was as tall as he was, in a sitting position, looking at him and still looking as starved and skinny as it did before. Izuku glared at him. "What the hell are you?" Izuku asked. The bunny laughed and looked at Izuku. "I am the hunger inside of you. I am all the desires you ever wanted." The bunny told him. "You desire friends, power, love, sex, connection. You don't care how you get it. You want what everyone else has, but you don't. That is why you did that to Abara. You wanted her. You wanted to dominate her. Destroy her. You wanted to fuck her." The bunny cried. Izuku growled as he continued to glare at the bunny. "But the one thing you want the most is to destroy and kill those 5. To kill Monoma." The bunny cried. "Give in to your hatred and anger to kill him. Discard your connections. Throw all that you love away. Throw away Mei. Throw away Toru. Hearing those final words, Izuku's anger at the bunny grew. Fuck off. Izuku cried, leave me alone you damn thing. The bunny chuckled before disappearing, and once it was gone, Izuku fell to his knees and grabbed his head. Fear and terror swirled inside of him as so many questions also ran through his mind. However, he quickly steeled his emotions and regained his composure, and simply walked away. He didn't want to be in the hallway when Abara left the infirmary. However, he didn't even rejoin his class in their seats. He simply walked around the arena waiting for Bakugo's fight to be over. It was time. The final round was here, and not to Izuku's surprise, Bakugo had made it to the final round with him, and both took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you our finalist. Mike announced. Give it up for the bombastic hero, Bakugo Katsuki. The crowd cheered for Bakugo as the ash blonde smiled smugly and looked at Izuku and then at the crowd. Kick that kid's ass. Show him what a real hero can do. Win this. Don't let that psycho win. Bakugo smiled as he looked back at Izuku. Ya hear that, Deku? Looks like you're not the hero of this whole thing, he said. Izuku didn't care as he just looked at Bakugo with a blank expression and one good eye. And give it up for the swordsman clad in black himself. The fighter WHO needs no quirk to dominate this competition. Izuku Midoriya, Mike announced. For the fourth time that day, the crowd booed him, repeating that he was no hero and that he should get off the stage, some even calling him a villain. Up in the booth, Mike looked over to Aizawa with a bit of a concerned look. Hey, Shota, should stop the crowd from booing Midoriya. He asked. I mean, it's kind of getting out of hand, he said. Aizawa shook his head. Let them, just shows what kind of heroes they are, Aizawa said, his eyes then going down to Izuku. Besides, it's not like they bother him. After all, they are just words, and what can words do to a person who's already faced hell? Aizawa finished. Back down in the stands of Class 1B, Abara returned to sit with her class. Itsuka, who noticed how long she was gone, turned to her classmate with a raised brow. Where were you, Abara? Itsuka asked her. Abara didn't look at her and just looked toward the stage. I was busy, Abara said. Itsuka was a little confused, but she then noticed the blush on her friend's face and saw the sweat she had gleaming on her forehead, and then followed where her eyes were looking and saw they were right on Izuku, and it didn't take Itsuka long to figure out that something had happened between the two, but she wondered what happened between them. Meanwhile, Abara kept her gaze on Izuku, a smile forming on her lips, and she could feel the heat rising within her once again, and she bit her lip as she remembered what happened in the infirmary. Thankfully, her vines hid the bite mark that Izuku gave her. As she looked down at the stage, at Izuku, she couldn't wait for the fight to begin, because for once during this whole festival, she wanted to see Izuku win. She wanted to see him utterly destroy Bakugo. She wanted to see him make the 1A student suffer just because she wanted to see Izuku be the beast he was. She needed to see that side of him again. She felt like she was before. She felt like she did with Josuke. And this time, she loved how she felt, and in a weird way, she loved Izuku. He didn't call her a freak, he didn't reject her, he put his mark on her, and she was happy for that. Midnight took the podium and looked at both boys. Are you ready? She asked. Fuck yeah, both boys cried. Midnight smiled and nodded. Very well then. Begin, Midnight cried. Once she said that, Bakugo rose his right hand up to blow Izuku away, but Izuku charged at him, surprising the ash blonde due to he never had anyone run toward him, but he still sent an explosion at the green-haired boy. The explosion struck Izuku and Bakugo smiled, knowing he blew Izuku away. However, as the smoke cleared, it was revealed that Izuku wasn't blown away. He stood his ground thanks to his sword being stabbed into the stage. Everyone was shocked that Izuku had managed to keep his ground. Even Bakugo was shocked completely. And Izuku pulled out his sword and looked at Bakugo with a sadistic smile, and then laughed. What's the matter, Kachan? Having problems with a Deku like me? Izuku asked with a smug smile. Have I gotten stronger? Or just weak? Hearing Izuku's taunting, Bakugo's anger skyrocketed through the roof, and his hands popped with tiny explosions and glared at his old friend with the most pissed-off face Izuku had ever seen. Bakugo then ran at Izuku, ready to make him pay for the words he had just spewed. You're gonna fucking pay for those words, Deku, Bakugo cried with anger. Izuku smiled sadistically and grabbed his sword firmly and charged at Bakugo as well, a crazed look in his eyes, and he laughed like a madman as she ran toward his old friend. "I've been waiting for this. Kachan!" Izuku cried. Guts swung at Toga, but she flew over him, avoiding his attack and landing right behind him. He turned around quickly to swing at her again, but when he looked at her, he could see flames growing in her mouth and he quickly jumped out of the way as she shot out a jet of fire at where he once stood. He quickly got back up and swung down in Toga, but she jumped up into the air and flew around for a few moments before landing in front of the older man. Guts looked at her, a bit angry due to the fact that he already had to deal with the Nomu they brought with them and now he had to deal with her. "Why are you here, Himiko Toga?" Guts asked her. Toga giggled. "You already know, doggy," she said with a smile. Guts looked at her. "You're after New Order," he told her. "You want to give it to the Fifth." Toga once again giggled. "You're good, but you only got half of that right," she told him. Hearing this, Guts was now worried that not only were they planning to steal one of the most powerful quirks known to mankind, a quirk that defied everything they knew about quirks, but they were also here for something else, but the question was what else was in the US that they wanted? "What else are you after?" Guts asked sternly. Toga looked at him with a sinister smile and crazed eyes. "We're not after anything else. New Order is our goal, however, in the grand scheme of our plans, New Order is just the first step in what we hope to achieve," she said with glee. Guts glared at her. "And what would that be?" he asked. "What do you hope to achieve through the Fifth?" Toga's smile widened and she began to giggle, before stopping and looking at the older man. "Japan," Toga said. ... Izuku was blasted in the back and stumbled forward, and Bakugo landed back on the arena and quickly turned around but Izuku beat him to it once the blonde turned. He was struck in the side by the flat end of Izuku's sword sending him back, and as Bakugo was thrown back, Izuku quickly pulled out one of his bombs and scrapped it across the ground, litting it and threw it at his old friend. However, Bakugo quickly regained himself and blasted up into the sky, avoiding the explosion. Once in the air, Bakugo looked down at Izuku and sent an explosion down at him, but Izuku used Apollyon as a shield and took the attack, but it still rattled him. Bakugo landed again and Izuku quickly rushed at him. But Bakugo sent more small explosions at him. However, Izuku continued to use his sword as a shield to block his attacks, and once he got in close, he swung at the blonde multiple times, but the 1A student dodged them, and after one swing from Izuku, Bakugo jumped over the blade and his hand glowed brightly and Izuku saw this and his eyes widened and he quickly raised his sword to block, but Bakugo already released the explosion, blowing Izuku away. The crowd cheered as they watched Izuku slowly be beaten by Bakugo. "What an amazing fight, ladies and gentlemen!" Mike yelled. "Despite the sheer beating Bakugo is giving, Midoriya is not giving up." Izuku slowly got up and looked over to Bakugo, who was smiling sinisterly like he had a million times in the past when facing the quirkless boy. Izuku hated that smile. It reminded him of when he was weak, when he was useless, when he was still just Deku. Bakugo could only hear the cheers for him, people pleading and begging him to eliminate Izuku and win the sports festival. It felt good. It felt as if everything he believed in was true, that he was the best, he was the strongest, he was going to win, and that the boy in front of him, the quirkless runt who the world did not care about, had no value, had nothing to offer the world, no matter how hard he fought. Izuku Midoriya would always be Deku in his eyes. "Do you hear all the heroes up there, Deku?" Bakugo asked. "They're singing my praises, they want me to get rid of you." "Do you know why?" Bakugo asked again. Izuku didn't answer, simply glaring at his old friend. "Because you don't belong here," Bakugo declared. "Give up, Deku. You have no place here amongst us born with quirks. We were born for this. Look around you. There are no heroes here you even like your sorry ass. Not even All Might. They don't cheer for you. No one loves you, and no one here will ever love a quirkless freak like you. You can't be a hero. As a matter of fact, everyone here sees you as the villain." Izuku simply stood there still glaring and seemingly unfazed by the hurtful words Bakugo was spewing. Seeing this, Bakugo continued, hoping to get under the skin of his opponent, because he didn't care how he looked at this point, he just wanted to win, no matter what. You have no one here who loves and supports you. You're alone. No friends. No father. No mother. Because they're all dead. Bakugo cried aloud. Hearing this seemed to make Izuku surprised as his eyes widened in shock, and the audience and many others in the stands quickly grew quiet. Bakugo only cared for Izuku's reaction, and when he saw the shock on the other boy's face, he knew he had something and he smiled. Are you forgetting how close our moms were? Of course, I heard about Auntie Inko's death. I heard about what happened to you. Bakugo cried. Your mom and all your little friends were torn to shreds during that eclipse event. Once everyone heard that, all eyes looked to the forest-haired boy, and whispers began to spread all across the stadium, wondering if what was being said was true, that the boy that had booed and judged, had survived such a hell that happened on that day. It must have been terrible for them, Bakugo said. They were being killed and what did you do? Hide and save your own skin. Cry and wait until it was all over. You did, because you're weak and useless. You're nothing but a damn Deku. Something inside of Izuku snapped. Everything about that day came surging forward, the deaths of his friends, how they were torn to shreds, ripped apart by Nomu on the orders of the sickest villains in the world, how Monoma betrayed him and Toru, the state of Toru's mind afterward, and worst of all, the fact that a day after he found out about Toru's condition, he learned of his mother's demise. She was in the area still when she dropped him off, and she was stuck inside that hell with him, but the worst part was that there was not even a body to recover. Just a pile of bloody clothes. Trying to get into contact with his father was useless. Hisashi Midoriya never answered his phone and never knew what befell his son. Bakugo was right. Izuku was truly alone in the world. He had no family to speak of and only had one friend in the world as of now. All those emotions combined into a single one that was directed at Bakugo for all that he said, all that he made Izuku remember. Pure uncontrolled fucking rage. Ah! Izuku quickly flew into a blind rage, as he yelled out in anger and rushed forward with his sword behind him, ready to strike the blonde. However, Bakugo saw him coming and smiled, believing his plan to have worked as he put both hands together, and they began to glow, and as they became brighter, a powerful explosion was released, one that was sure to send Izuku out of the arena. The explosion was so loud that it shook the arena. Once he was finished, Bakugo lowered his hands and smiled at the smoke cloud, believing that he had won. Suddenly, bursting out of the smoke like a demon from hell was Izuku, sword still in hand. However, his entire body radiated heat and steam, showing that he had been struck by the explosion, but somehow, did not get blown away. What the hell? Bakugo cried. Bakugo's hand popped with tiny explosions and he's showing his open palm at Izuku, delivering a small explosion to Izuku's left side. However, that seemed to faze him barely as Izuku swung the flat end of his sword at Bakugo, knocking him over to the side. Izuku quickly swung at the explosion user while he is down. However, Bakugo rolled to the side, avoiding the attack, and he got up and delivered a slap explosion to the right side of Izuku's face, causing the other boy to stumble back as smoke clouded his face. Bakugo's anger rose as H began to wonder why Izuku still was able to fight, how he could still get up and fight, how he was able to land hits on him. How is Deku able to beat me? This should be impossible. He's quirkless. He's weak. He's Deku. Bakugo thought as Izuku stumbled backward. Izuku's right side was burned but not too seriously. However, he continued to push past the pain as he swung at Bakugo, getting him again. Izuku pulled back for another attack. However, once he swung, Bakugo shot off an explosion that caused Izuku's sword to be pushed away. Yet the boy did not lose his grip of the monstrous sword, but it gave Bakugo enough time to kick Izuku in the stomach hard, sending him back. This time, Bakugo was relentless. He closed the gap he created and quickly delivered small explosions, kicks, and punches, over and over again. He was fast that Izuku didn't have time to regain his composure. Yet, Izuku tanked the beating and pulled out a bomb and threw it at Bakugo, who was about to send an explosion at the sword wielder, and once he released the explosion, Izuku's bomb went off and the two forces met and Bakugo was blown back a little. Once Bakugo was away, Izuku stabbed Apollyon into the stage and leaned against it, breathing heavily. From her spot, Mei could tell that Izuku was reaching his limit. He had just tanked so many powerful attacks and relentlessly being struck by the sheer force of the explosion while also getting burned in the process. Mei wasn't the only one who was worried, as in their seats the rest of Class B looked down at their fellow student with worry. Itsuka had already informed them about the fact that Izuku was a survivor of the eclipse after the race, but hearing about how he lost everything, including his mother, sent a wave of sadness through them. Tetsu was angry that Bakugo was spewing such hate about his friend and wanted to go down there and knock some sense into him. Izuku was his friend, even if Izuku said otherwise, and he knew what his friend had gone through, and it angered him someone would use that against him. Abara was worried most of all. She had felt terrible for the things she said to him before, but also because she may have slowly begun liking him due to what happened between them in the infirmary. Izuku was aware that he couldn't continue like this. Bakugo was a damn beast, by far one of the most powerful students amongst first years, which is why he needed to finish this, he needed to win. But how? Bakugo glared at Izuku. Come on Deku. What are you waiting for? Give me a reason to blow your ass out of the arena. Bakugo cried. Izuku's eyes widened and a dark glare formed on his face, and an idea that would work but be very dangerous to both himself and Bakugo, but he didn't care what happened to him, as long as he won. Izuku smiled as he grabbed his entire bag of explosives and he looked at Bakugo. Thanks for the idea, Katsuki, Izuku said. Bakugo was confused about what he meant until he saw Izuku take one bomb out of his bag, light it and drop it back in the bag. He then quickly threw it right in the middle of them and Bakugo's eyes widened with utter fright. He knew what was about to happen as he knew there was no escape. He couldn't blast up in the air nor could he cancel out the explosion. Something like that was impossible. Izuku just smiled as he saw Bakugo's expression and quickly pulled Apollyon out of the stage and put it in front of him, stabbing it deeper into the arena and shielding himself behind it, but there was no guarantee that it would work. Finally, the explosion went off and it was so big that most of the stage was destroyed, and Midnight and Cementos were blown back. The shockwave blew out the windows of most of the stadium, and the smoke blinded everyone in the audience. Unbelievable. The explosion caused by Midoriya has rocked the entire stadium. Mike cried. He moved away from the mic and looked at Eraserhead. Do you think they both even survived? He asked. Eraserhead nodded. I believe those two are still alive. After all, both are much too angry to die, he said. Midnight got off the ground and dusted herself off, as did Cementos. Damn crazy brat, Midnight cried. What the hell was he thinking? Cementos looked toward the stage and the smoke began to clear. I do not know what was going on through the young man's head, but it was extremely dangerous and reckless, he said. Up in the stands, some of Class B were in shock, and the sheer power all those little bombs had. Holy hell, that was insane, Setsuna cried. Itsuka was at a loss for words, surprised that one of her fellow classmates and weapons was that dangerous. One was enough to blow someone back and burn them a little, but all of them going off was like a bomb that could blow up a whole floor back at UA. Finally, the smoke cleared and they saw the stage was split in two, and still on stage was Izuku, still shielding himself behind Apollyon, yet, he didn't come out unscathed as steam was coming off of him, and then there was Bakugo, covered in dirt just out of bounds. Midnight rushed over to Izuku while Cementos rushed over to Bakugo. Midoriya, are you okay? Can you move? She asked. Izuku didn't respond. He simply pulled Apollyon out from the arena and rested it on his shoulder, and he then muttered something under his breath, but Midnight didn't hear him. What? Midnight asked. Izuku then turned to her. His eyes were stone cold and his expression was blank. Do I win? He asked in a strained voice. Midnight was astounded. This 15-year-old teen had faced 3 powerful quirk users, been wounded by each of them, and had just pulled the stupidest stunt she had ever seen as a teacher, and all he cared about was winning this fight, not his own well-being. He was truly built differently than the rest. She looked at Cementos. Is Bakugo able to move? She asked. Cementos looked away from the blonde and looked at Midnight, and shook his head. He's not injured, simply unconscious, Cementos told her. Doesn't matter. Take him to Recovery Girl, Midnight told him. She then stood up and looked around at the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you your winner of the first year's sports festival. Izuku Midoriya, Midnight cried. No one said a word, as they were all stunned by what this had meant. A person with no quirk, someone who shouldn't have been allowed to be in UA at all or participate in the sports festival, someone who faced 3 powerful people with quirks that should have beaten him, defeated them, and had won this entire event. Izuku didn't care, he turned around and lowered his sword, he then walked away slowly. Midnight quickly turned to him. "Midoriya, you need to see Recovery Girl," she said with a worried tone. I'm fine," he replied as he continued walking away. However, he eventually fell forward. Midnight yelled and rushed over to him. As she did, Izuku's vision began to blur in and out and he swore that he saw the bunny, looking at him before it disappeared. As he was falling unconscious, a single thought ran through his mind. "Kimihito. Josuke. Kanao. Toru. I won," Izuku thought as he finally blacked out. Later, in the infirmary, Izuku's eyes slowly opened and he found himself lying down in a cot and he was covered in bandages. He looked around to find himself alone in the infirmary, and he looked up to the ceiling, relaxing his body and letting out a long sigh. He thought about everything that happened today, and he thought about his victory earlier today, and he felt good about it. However, he remembered what Bakugo said. "Do you hear all the heroes up there, Deku?" Bakugo asked. "They're singing my praises, they want me to get rid of you. Do you know why?" Bakugo asked again. "Because you don't belong here," Bakugo declared. "Give up, Deku. You have no place here amongst us born with quirks. We were born for this. Look around you. There are no heroes here you even like your sorry ass. Not even All Might. They don't cheer for you. No one loves you. And no one here will ever love a quirkless freak like you. You can't be a hero. As a matter of fact, everyone here sees you as the villain." Remembering those words, Izuku felt hurt by them. However, he didn't feel sorry for himself. After all, he brought all that hate and fear of him due to how he acted, and he can't blame them for not liking him. "I'm fine with that," Izuku thought. "I don't care about being hated or loved. As long as I'm able to kill him, I'll be happy." "If you're okay with being hated and never loved, then let go." Izuku looked at his chest and saw the bunny sitting atop his chest, and it was still as big as him, and looked at him, its mouth agape, drooling as if starved, its red eyes stared into his emerald green one. Izuku glared. "What are you doing here?" Izuku asked. "I'm here to tell you that you should let go," the bunny told Izuku. "Allow yourself to be swallowed into the abyss. Discard your feelings. Discard your Mei and Toru. Just focus on killing Monoma. He's all that matters. His death. His blood staining our sword. We need to kill him." Suddenly, flashes of images ran through Izuku's head, and in those flashes, he saw the bunny chewing on the bodies of Toru and Mei. Their blood sprayed across the ground, and their guts being eaten by the bunny. However, the bunny faded and instead it was him. Standing over the bodies of his friends, Apollyon was covered in their blood and guts. Izuku grabbed his head and sat up quickly, and he shook his head rapidly and he began to sweat furiously, scared of what he had seen, of what he was capable of. "What are you?" Izuku asked. "I told you. I am the hunger inside of you. I am all the desires you ever wanted. I have always been inside of you. I am the darkness that was born from your hatred and sadness," the bunny cried. Izuku slowly looked at his hand and saw that it was shaking, and he wondered why. Why now? Was he scared? Wasn't he willing to do whatever to kill Monoma? "No, I'd never give them up to kill him," Izuku thought. "Why not?" "He did," the bunny cried. "If it helps us we should do it," the bunny cried. However, Izuku paid the bunny no attention and he just stared at his shaky hand. Is this fear? Or anger? Both? Izuku asked himself. He then looked back at the rabbit. "Whatever it is, I know this. I can never atone for this darkness inside of me," Izuku said. The bunny's eyes glared at Izuku. "Of course, you'll never atone for me, and will you ever escape me? I am a part of you forever." Izuku glared back at the beast in front of him. "Then if I can't atone, if I can't escape, then all I can do is burn myself. And my enemies with it," Izuku said, glaring daggers at the beast. "But I will not ask for your help, ever." The bunny simply looked at Izuku and began to chuckle. One day, you'll beg for my help," the bunny said before finally fading away. Once the bunny was gone, Izuku remained sitting up, only to hear the door open and he turned his head to see Nezu had entered the infirmary. "Ah, it seems you're finally awake," Nezu said with a smile as he walked toward the young boy. Izuku's brow raised in confusion. "Why are you here?" Izuku asked. Nezu pulled out a gold medal from behind his back and smiled. "I'm here to give you this," Nezu told him. Nezu threw him the medal and Izuku caught it and looked at it. A sense of pride was felt inside of him. Despite him not doing it for the medal, he still felt proud about earning it, wondering what his mother would have thought. You gave the country quite a show. I don't think we've ever had a sports festival like it before, Nezu told him, and I have to admit, I do think this one is going to be my personal favorite, and I'm sure many others love today's sports festival as well, Nezu finished. Izuku looked back at him. I only wanted to win because it would get closer to getting what I want, Izuku said, and slowly a sinister smile spread across his face, and now I got it. Nezu was now confused. What do you mean, young Midoriya? Nezu asked. Everyone was watching the sports festival, and I'm sure of it, that they were watching as well, and now they know. I'm coming for them, he finished wickedly. Nezu just looked at him and let out a sigh. He turned around and slowly walked away, but stopped when he was at the door and turned back to Izuku. I hope to see you in class next week, young Midoriya, and I hope you also have a quick recovery. After all, next week is going to test you, Nezu said, and then finally leaving. Izuku watched his principal leave and decided he was going to leave. He grabbed spare gym clothes, put them over his bandages, and he grabbed the magnet sheath, strapped it to his back. Then he grabbed Apollyon and set it on his back. He then looked around and saw his black cloak. However, when he grabbed it fully, he saw it was in tatters. He let out a sigh. Maybe I can ask Maid to make me a new one, Izuku thought. He wore the black tattered cloak and walked out of the infirmary. However, Nezu was right. Next week was going to test Izuku because it was going to be the beginning of the end. The fifth hand of God was finally going to be born. It has been a few days since the sports festival, and UA was resuming classes, but today was also the day. The student would be choosing which hero they would be staying with and working under. So many in the hero course were excited. However, that is where the good news ended. Guts had returned from the US and currently, he was walking toward the teacher's lounge rather quickly, hoping to catch All Might, but thankfully, All Might was already leaving the teacher's lounge with a lunchbox. Toshinori, Gits called out. All Might turned his head toward Guts's direction and see the large man. All Might smiled. Oh, Guts. All Might said cheerfully as he walked toward the man. How have you been? It's been years since we last saw each other. What are you doing here? Matter of fact, how did you get past Nezu? All Might told him. Guts nodded. It has been a long time, Toshinori. As for getting here, Nezu and I have something in common as of now, but I'm not here to catch up, Guts told him. I have some bad news. It involves All for One. Hearing this, All Might's expression became serious, and he quickly nodded and led him to a secluded room where the two could talk. Once inside, the two sat down and began the conversation. All Might looked at Guts. What's all this about? He asked. What have you found out about All for One? All Might asked. Guts looked at him. He's alive. I know that much when I stopped him during the Eclipse event, Guts told him. All Might nodded. Yes, Gran Torino informed me when he met you on the scene, All Might said. Guts nodded. Of course, he hasn't been silent recently, what with the USJ attack, and recently, a few days ago, I was following up on a lead about one of his angels heading toward the US, Guts told him. All Might was shocked when he heard that. The US? How? All for One has no pull there, All Might cried. Guts nodded. He still doesn't, why I followed, because I was wondering why he or any one of his angels would dive right into enemy territory, Guts told him. I tried to track them down and eventually I did, but by the time I did, it was too late. They got what they came for, Guts said grimly. All Might was confused and most of all, very worried. What do you mean? What did they come for? All Might asked. Guts looked at him with a severe expression. They have new order. Hearing this, All Might nearly had a heart attack, hearing that his worst enemy, the person he despised the most and wished he made sure was dead those years ago, had one, if not, the most potent quirk known to man. However, he was more worried about the quirk's user. Kathleen, is she okay? All Might asked. Guts nodded. She's fine, and the fact she doesn't have a quirk anymore doesn't seem to bother her, but she's more worried about us here, as well as you, Guts told him. I told her we'd find a way to sort this all out, but we both know this is the worst news in the world, mostly for us. Yes. It is, All Might replied. They have to be stopped, as soon as possible, but we don't even know where they are, All Might told him with a bit of anger in his voice. Guts looked at him. I may know where one of their bases is, Guts said. All Might looked at him, with relief. That's good to hear, All Might said. Then, we can plan something with a few other heroes and head there. No, Guts cut him off. All Might looked at him confused. What do you mean no? He asked. Guts looked at him. I mean, no, to you coming with. Guts told him. I doubt he's there. He wouldn't risk being there. And people need you here, not out there. Let me take care of this. Guts told him. All Might looked at him with a concerned look. Guts, you need to worry about yourself as well, All Might told him. Guts smiled. Don't worry about me. I'm not going alone, he said. I got my own student to help me out, he said. All Might looked at him. You mean, young Midoriya, don't you? He asked with a slight smile. I should have known. He reminds me of you back in the day, he said. Guts nodded. Which is why I'm taking him with me. This involves him as much as it involves you and I. After all, you and I aren't getting any younger. All Might nodded. Too true, All Might said, but be careful. Guts nodded. Don't worry about me too much, ya skeleton, Guts jokingly told him. Now, mind telling me where Izuku is? Guts asked. All Might told Guts where Izuku usually was at this time, as many students and teachers have seen Izuku, along with Tetsu and Mei in the courtyard. Guts bid All Might goodbye and headed down to the courtyard and passed by a few students. Currently, out in the courtyard, Izuku was practicing his swings as Tetsu and Mei watched him, eating their own lunch and amazed by how swiftly and controlled the swings were. I still find it crazy he can lift and swing so easily, Mei said with a smile. He was pretty strong back in middle school, but I never thought he could wield something so freaking big. Tetsu smiled. I know, it's so cool, even cooler that he can do it without a quirk. Tetsu said, but hey. Guess that the winner of the sports festival for Ya, he cried with a chuckle. Izuku stopped swinging and rested his sword on his shoulder as he turned to Tetsu with an annoyed glare. Will you stop that already? It's bad enough I already got the damn press in my back wanting to talk to me, Izuku told him. I didn't care about winning. I only cared about sending a message, he said coldly. A message I'm sure they got. Hearing that voice, the three teens turned around to see Guts walking toward them with a bit of a smile. Izuku smiled back at the man. Guts, he greeted. Mei looked between the two with a confused look. You know each other? Mei asked. Guts turned to her with a bit of a smirk on his face as well. Who do you think taught him how to use that thing in his hands? Guts asked. Tetsu's eyes widened with excitement at the older man. Whoa. So you're Izubro's teacher? Tetsu cried. Guts nodded. Yeah, Guts replied. Izuku walked over to him and looked at him with a raised brow. What are you doing here? Matter of fact, Rickert told me you went to the US. Why? Izuku asked. Guts's expression turned serious. They were in the US, and stole something rather powerful that I'm sure they brought back here, Guts told Izuku. Something I'm sure is meant for the fifth angel. Mei and Tetsu were confused as to what Guts meant by the fifth angel, but Izuku knew exactly who Guts was talking about. Monoma, Izuku seething in his thoughts, do you know where they are? Izuku asked, his tone full of anger. Tetsu and Mei noticed his anger, and both had a feeling as to what the two swordsmen were referring to. Mei more so, however, she couldn't help but feel that Izuku had some personal vendetta against this fifth angel. Guts looked at him and nodded. I know where they are. They got a base in the mountains, which is why I'm here. You're gonna be coming with me, Guts told him. I convinced Nezu to be the person who watched over Ya during this whole hero thing, Guts told him. Izuku nodded. When do we leave? Izuku asked. Now, Guts told him. Izuku walked toward Guts ready to leave with him. Wait, Mei cried. Izuku stopped and looked at the pink-haired girl. Mei looked at the two with a determined look. I'm coming with, she told Izuku. Mei. You're not telling me to stay behind, she cried. If these are the same guys that killed our friends and ruined Toru's life, I want to help, she cried. Guts looked at her with a raised brow. Are you in the hero course? He asked Mei. Mei shook her head. No, she replied. I'm in the support department, which is why I'm coming. I have some new gear that could help you, Mei told him. Jitus looked away from her and at Izuku. She can come with, he told Izuku. If she really wants to, she can, Guts told him. Izuku wanted to disagree. He didn't want Mei getting involved with this. He wanted her to stay behind where she would be safe, but she had every right to come as much as he did. So, he let out a sigh of defeat. Fine, let's head to your lab, and then let's go, Izuku told her. Mei nodded and the three began to walk away. while Tetsu wanted to join them. However, this was something personal for them, their own battle, and unless he was asked to help, he would not interfere, even though his heart was telling him to. Izuku looked back and saw the conflict on Tetsu's face, and stopped and looked back to Guts and Mei as they walked ahead. Don't feel bad that you can't come along. This doesn't involve you, and the last thing I want is another dead friend, Izuku said. Tetsu looked at Izuku as the green-haired teen walked away, not looking back, but his words made Tetsu feel a little better, even more so since in a sense, Izuku had just called him his friend. Tetsu smiled and nodded. You come back alive, Izubro. You too, Mei, Tetsu cried. As they walked back into the UA building, Mei led them to the support department, and they quickly entered, and Mei went over to her desk to show Izuku the new gear she had made for him after seeing his fights in the sports festival. While Izuku had only put in the request for a new cloak, Mei, however, wasn't going to stop there. She knew her friend needed a lot more protection, and a lot more firepower than he had now. I made you some more bombs just like your old ones. I made as many as I could, which is a whole lot, Mei said, handing him a larger pouch of bombs than he had before. Izuku took it and strapped it to his belt. What else is there? He asked. Mei smiled and pulled out a black metal wristband. She handed it to him. Put this on and give it a nice tap, Mei said. Izuku did as she said and put the wristband on his left wrist and then tapped it, and once he did, black-like cloth sprouted and spread up his forearm and around his hand, leaving part of his fingers exposed. The whole thing looked like black tape around a boxer's hand. Izuku was in awe at it and then looked at the palm of his left hand only to find a ring shape. He looked at Mei with a raised brow. What is this? Izuku asked. Mei smiled. That is what I like to call HOD, or Hand of Destruction. It's a special type of gauntlet that absorbs kinetic energy and can store it. You can then release I into a powerful blast of energy from the palm, Mei told him. She pulled out a chest strap with throwing daggers sheathed on it. She then pulled out his black cloak. These are your new daggers, as well as the new cloak you wanted, and while the daggers aren't anything special, the cloak itself is made of the same cloth that Endeavor's suit is made out of, which makes it resistant to extreme heat, she told him. Izuku smiled at her. This is all great stuff, Mei, thank you, he told her. Mei smiled back. Don't mention it. Besides that, I got everything I need in a bag I made suited for situations like this, and once we get to wherever your teacher is taking us, I'll give us all a set of earpieces so that we can communicate with each other, Mei told him. Izuku nodded, and with that, Guts told them it was time to leave, and the three left the building, and when they arrived in the front, they saw a small, beat-up RV. Guts ushered them in, and once inside, they drove off, heading toward the mountains where the base was located. Guts also informed them that they would meet up with some heroes that know the area better than he does and could help them, which Izuku was all for. He just wanted to get there, find the base, and kill Monoma. He was not going to spare the person he once called a friend. He was not going to let him live. He didn't even care if he died in the process, as long as Monoma went down with him. After all, he swore that he would burn his enemies and himself with the dark flame that was inside of him. Meanwhile, within a forest known as the Beast's Forest where the wild Pussycats lived, a young boy, Kota Izumi, walked along the forest, searching for rocks he could toss across the river. As he looked, he happened to come across a strange one. The stone was a dark red color and in the shape of an egg. Kota picked it up and looked at it with a confused look, but picked it up and put it in his pocket. Once he did, he continued looking for more rocks only to hear groaning. He was confused and moved to the groaning. He pushed past a few bushes only to eventually come across a girl who was older than him, who was lying on the ground. Her clothes were torn and a few cuts and bruises on her. It was Toru. Kota was shocked and quickly ran over to her. Hey, lady, are you okay? Kota asked as he shook her. Toru quickly got up and looked at Kota before backing away, screaming only to be stopped by a bush. Hey, take it easy, Kota cried. I'm not going to hurt you, he told her. Toru looked at him with fearful eyes, but slowly she began to calm down as Kota looked at her, and held out his hand for her to take. It's okay, I'm not gonna hurt ya, he told her. Toru finally moved toward him and took his hand. Kota smiled as the girl stood up, looking down at him with a sad expression. What's your name? Kota asked. Toru gave no answer, simply looking at the younger boy. Kota was confused, but decided to introduce himself. My name is Kota, do you have a name? He asked again, hoping to get the response. Ah, replied the girl. Kota was confused but wondered if something may have been wrong with this girl that may have something to do with why she was cut up and bruised. It's okay, you don't have to tell me, Kota told her. I'll bring you to my aunt, maybe she can help you, Kota said. Kota held Toru's hand tighter and led her back toward the house where his aunt and her friends would be able to help the girl, who was willing to follow Kota, and once he arrived he heard his aunt and her friends talking about business. 30 missing people, in a single night, cried Tiger. How is that possible? I don't know, but whoever has taken them has a type. The reports say that most of the people who were taken had mutant-type quirks, Ragdoll told him. Pixie Bob looked at the report with worry, as some of the missing people were entire families that included children. Whoever they are, they don't care who they take, she said. Mandalay nodded. Indeed, and they will be stopped, no matter what, she said. What worries me is why are they taking these people with mutant types and what are they using them for? She asked. Little did they know that the answers they sought would be given to them in a matter of time. After all the pieces that were needed for the fifth angel's ascension were gathering in one place. Late in the night, Izuku, Mei, and Guts arrived at the Pussycats' lodge, got out of the RV, and walked toward it, but were already met by the 4 feline-themed heroes. Tiger looked at Guts with a serious expression. Guts, he greeted. Guts gave him a nod. Tiger, Guts greeted back. Mandalay looked to see 2 teens with Guts. Guts, who are they? She asked. Guts turned to her. These 2 are Izuku Midoriya and Mei Hatsume. Guts told her. Izuku's my apprentice at UA, and Mei is his friend. Pixie Bob was confused. Why are you getting UA students involved? She asked with a concerned tone. Because this involves us, Izuku cut in. Ragdoll looked at the teen boy with a peered glare only to recognize him. You're the sports festival winner, right? She asked. You're also the other survivor of the Eclipse event, she said. Hearing what her teammates said, Pixie Bob looked closer at the boy and realized that her friend was right, so now it made sense why he joined Guts. Tiger nodded. Anyway, for now, you 3 must be tired. We'll rest for tonight and discuss everything in the morning. Mandalay agreed. Yes, she said. Mandalay turned around. Kota, will you show them? However, she stopped when she noticed that her nephew was nowhere in sight. Mandalay looked around rapidly, and noticing her teammates realized why she was looking around and did the same. Kota, Mandalay cried. Kota, where are you? Suddenly, coming out of the bushes was Kota, dragging along a girl who both Izuku and Mei recognized immediately. Toru, both of them cried. Toru turned to see Mei and smiled before she also noticed Izuku and quickly hid behind Kota and growled at the green-haired boy. Izuku was hurt by seeing her reaction but steeled himself and didn't show the hurt, while Mei walked over to Toru. Pixie Bob looked at Izuku. You know who she is? She asked. Izuku nodded. Yeah, she's an old friend, and the other person who survived the Eclipse event, Izuku said, if you wanna call the state she's in surviving. Calming down her old friend, Mei realized the large implications of her being here and looked to the 4 heroes with worry. Why is she here? She asked. Did something happen to her aunt? Mei asked. Kota shook his head. I don't know, I found her in the woods and she was a bit cut up, Kota said. I brought her here because I knew she needed help and since then she's been following me, Kota told her. Guts knew this wasn't good. If someone like her was out and about she either got lost or something far worse happened. Guts looked at the heroes. I think while they rest we need to talk, Guts told them. The 4 heroes nodded and Mandalay told Kota to show the students where they would be sleeping, and Kota nodded and led them, with Toru following after him and Mei, but keeping her distance from Izuku. As they walked toward the rooms, Izuku couldn't help but think about how she was still scared of him, just like she was after the eclipse. It shouldn't have bothered him, but it did, as a part of him hoped that it would have changed, but things were still the same. The next day, other heroes showed up at the Pussycats' lodge but all of them met in the meeting room that was located in the lodge, while Toru and Kota played outside with Izuku and Mei watching over them. The heroes with Guts and the Pussycats were fourth kind, Uebami, Yukyu, and Edgeshot. All of them looked at the man with a large sword, 3 of them wondering who he was. You mind telling us why you called us here and who this guy is? Fourth kind asked. Tiger nodded. The reason we called you here is because we have a very big problem that only we can resolve. As for who this is Guts, a friend of ours. He a hero? Fourth kind asked. Tiger shook his head. Not exactly, Tiger said. Then why is he here? Someone like him shouldn't be involved in a mission like this, Uwabami said. No, he has every right to be here, Yukio said. I recognize him after the Eclipse event. He's the one who saved the 2 survivors and if I remember correctly, a former student at UA, Yukio told them. Edgeshot turned toward the dragon hero with a raised brow. And how do you know this? He asked. Because I fought him once during my time as a student in Shiketsu, Yukio replied. He, much like the boy outside, has no quirk. Hearing this, the other heroes were surprised by the information as well as learning that someone like him took on someone as powerful and strong as Yukio, who was very high up in the ranks of heroes. Guts looked at her. Surprised you recognized me, he said. Of course, hard to forget someone who was able to cut through my scales, Yukio said with a small smile. Did you train that UA boy outside? I wouldn't be surprised. After all, he won the sports festival with such bestiality as you did during our fight. Guts nodded. I did, but we're getting off topic, Guts said. The reason we called you here is that the threat is on its way, Guts told them. And what threat is this? Edgeshot asked. It involves All for One, Guts replied. All for One, Uwabami cried in shock. You've gotta be kidding me. Fourth kind cried. Mandalay shook her head. It's true, Guts has informed us that it was AFO behind the Eclipse event as well as the USJ attack, and it seems that some of his associates are involved with the many kidnapping of mutant types in the area, Mandalay told them, and it seems that the reason for the missing mutant types is because someone that works under AFO is gathering them to use them in order to create what is called a God-tier Nomu, or God Hand, as Guts told us. God Hand? Yukio asked. Guts nodded. 4 perfect Nomu with multiple quirks. They are very powerful, just as powerful as him, and if I'm right, they are trying to make a 5th one, Guts began, and I fear he may be a lot stronger than the rest due to them stealing a very powerful quirk from the US, Guts said. Edgeshot's brow raised with curiosity. A quirk from the US? You don't mean? Yes, they stole that one, Guts clarified. If they have it, then why hasn't AFO used it? Yukio asked. Surely with a quirk like that he'd be unstoppable. Guts nodded. He would, and he wouldn't even need to hide anymore, but he's not using it and I suspect he's giving it to the 5th, which confuses, but also makes me worried, Guts replied. Whatever he's planning can't be good for us, because there's one thing that I've known about the man, he wants to be God. God? Uwabami asked. Guts nodded. Everything he's ever done is gaining power and massing followers to his cause. He wants to rule Japan, and if he could, the world, Guts said. He wants everyone to bend the knee and lick his feet, but then there was my teacher and All Might who stood in his way. Your teacher? Edgeshot asked. All Might I understand, but who was this teacher that could stand up against one of the greatest legends in villain history? Guts looked at the ninja hero. Technically it wasn't who she was, it was what she made that could oppose him, he replied. Uwabami raised a brow in confusion. What do you mean? She asked. All Might is a quirk that is monstrous in strength, and AFO can compete with that, but both are still human and both have their limits. So my teacher created something that didn't have such a thing, something that would not stop until it fulfilled the user's purpose. She then entrusted it to me after she died and I used it. Fourth kind looked at Guts. Do you have it then? Fourth kind asked. Guts shook his head in response. Why not? If you have something that powerful, why not use it? He asked the swordsman. Because it nearly killed me, Guts replied. That thing needs a host. If you want to word it like that, when my teacher used it, it killed her, and the time I used it, it nearly killed me, and it took me far too late to get control of it, Guts said. Many were curious as to what this thing was, as the way it sounded to them. It was a living thing that fed off another living thing, a parasite in a sense. However, I think we have enough time to stop them from creating the 5th and whatever they plan on doing to those people, Guts said. Edgeshot looked at Guts. So what's the plan? He asked. With Yukio's help, We'll be able to patrol the skies and look through every abandoned place thoroughly, Mandalay said. How many abandoned places are in this forest? Fourth Khand asked. About 30, she replied. Some small, some big, she finished. What about the students? Uabami asked. We need them here because they are the ones protecting the lodge as well as the only people who'll have contact between us and the outside world, Ragdoll said. Sounds good to me. I don't want them getting involved should we run into trouble, Yukio said. Edgeshot nodded in agreement. Indeed, he said. Good. Then let's get going, Guts said. The heroes left meeting room and Guts headed outside, where he saw Izuku watching over Kota and Toru playing tag, as Mei was with him. Izuku turned his head and noticed Guts as he walked over to him. So, when are we going? Izuku asked. You're staying here, Guts told him. Izuku glared at him. Why? He asked. Because she's here, Guts said. Izuku realized who he was talking about but still glared at the older man. What does that have? Would you really be okay leaving her behind with just Kota and Mei? Guts asked. Izuku stopped and his eyes widened in realization, and he quickly stopped. However, he didn't answer the question, simply turning and sitting back down. Guts knew the answer and simply walked away, glad that the boy made the right decision. As Izuku sat back down next to Mei, who was working on something, he couldn't help but think about Guts's question. Would he really be okay with leaving Toru behind with just Kota and Mei? What would happen if the lodge got attacked and Toru was hurt or worse killed? Who cares? We should be out there hunting Monoma down, came the dark voice of the bunny. Izuku growled, wanting the thing to disappear, not wanting it to hear it. Why ignore the truth? You know we should be out there hunting him down and tearing him apart limb from limb. Not babysitting someone with the mind of an infant. Izuku growled, wanting the thing to shut up, feeling he was about to burst with rage due to the words the beast spat. However, he couldn't deny that a part of him, the darker part of him, agreed with the beast's claims. Yo, Izu bro. Izuku was taken out of his thoughts and the beast's presence and voice disappeared as he turned his head only to see none other than Tetsu, and following behind him were three other of his classmates, which were Awase, Itsuka, and surprisingly, Abara. Izuku and Mei stood up, surprised to see the other boy here with them. Tetsu, what are you doing here? Mei asked. My work study was fourth kind, and he got called here and had me tag along, and when I heard I was coming here I was so freaking happy since I would be able to help you two with whatever's going on. Tetsu replied. Mei gave him a soft smile. That's good to hear, Mei said. Izuku walked next to Mei and looked at the other three. Surprised to see you all here, he told them. I'm not, Itsuka said with a smile. Seems like you just can't stay out of the spotlight, Itsuka said. I have to agree, Awase said. First it was the USJ, now it's this. Trouble seems to follow you, Midoriya. Izuku slowly nodded in agreement. From behind the two was Abara, who looked at Izuku with a troubled expression, not knowing how to approach him after what had happened between the two back during the sports festival. However, she was taken out of her worries after someone crashed into her and they both fell to the ground. Ah, are you okay? Kota cried. Abara got up only to see that lying next to her was Toru, who gave her a blank look before getting to her knees. Abara got up to her knees as well as Toru got closer and looked at her, analyzing the vine-haired girl, before giving her a look of amazement and grabbing one of her vines and slowly touching it and looking at it as if she never seen anything like it before. Abara was a bit confused. Who is this? Abara asked awkwardly. Mei looked to see Toru playing with Ibara's hair. Toru. Stop it, Mei cried. Izuku walked over to Toru to stop her, but when he was close, Toru saw him and quickly ran away and hid behind Kota, and hissed at the green-haired boy. Toru cried frantically. Kota looked at her and calmed her down. It's okay, he's not gonna hurt you, Kota reassured her. Toru calmed down and smiled at the boy and gave him a big hug and a large smile. Izuku sighed and walked over to Abara and held out his hand for her to take, and seeing this, Abara took his hand as he helped her up. Thank you, Abara said politely. Izuku gave her a quick nod before looking back at Toru. Her name's Toru. Was my friend, Izuku corrected himself. Abara wondered why Izuku corrected himself, but then remembered how the girl reacted to him as he approached. She looked back at Toru as she happily tried to catch the ball Kota tossed back toward her but failed and walked over to pick it up and tossed it back. The girl was clearly their age, but Abara saw her childish demeanor and wondered what was wrong with her, clearly seeing that she wasn't normal. If I had to guess, she's the other survivor next to you, right? Turning around, Izuku looked at Itsuka, who gave him a look of understanding, and Izuku replied with a nod. Seeing Izuku give Itsuka confirmation on who Toru was, she looked back at the girl with surprise. She was our friend before she became like that, Mei said, sounding a little sad. Abara couldn't help but look at the girl with pity, knowing that the state she was living in must have been hard for Izuku and Mei to see and hard for those that had to take care of her, but also understood how she ended up in such a condition. So, what should we do while the pros are away? Tetsu asked. Itsuka looked at him. We're supposed to be protecting the lodge, most likely from any villains or those Nomu things, but besides that, I'm sure we can find a way to entertain ourselves, she told them. Mei nodded in agreement. Yeah, I'm sure we can find something to do, Mei agreed with a smile. However, I think we should be informed about what's going on first, Itsuka said. The heroes said they were looking for a villain base as well as a bunch of missing people, but it's not that simple, is it, Izuku? Itsuka asked. Izuku looked at her and nodded, knowing that because of what was happening and what may happen in the future, they needed to be informed of what he knew, which also wasn't much, but he was sure it was enough. With that, Izuku informed the four of what was really happening, and everything he learned after the eclipse, but never touched on what happened during the eclipse, leaving out a certain someone from the story. Within the base, Dr. Garaki looked at a large pod where a test subject who could turn into sludge, who was infused with over 50 quirks and still did not become a Nomu, yet, it seemed that his mental state had taken a toll as he was banging against the class frantically while screaming. Make them stop. Make them stop. I can hear their voices. They're screaming, he cried. Garaki smiled at the subject. It'll all be over soon. Once you've been given one final quirk, you'll be given to the fifth, he said with a sinister tone. However, he heard footsteps behind him only to see Stain standing behind him with a glare. We have a problem, he told the doctor. What is it? Garaki asked with a raised brow. Heroes, Stain seethed. I just saw 2 top-ranked heroes patrolling the skies and I'm sure there's a few searing the forest. Garaki sighed. Toga warned me that he'd start looking for them once he got back. I suppose this was inevitable, he said. I can deal with them, Stain said. Garaki shook his head. No, because that will just cause us problems, he said. The only heroes in the area that know these mountains are the Pussycats. They have a lodge not far from here. Attack that as I'm sure that's where these heroes are working from, Garaki said. Stain reluctantly agreed. Fine, he replied. Attacking their base should cause them to retreat back to the lodge, which will give us time to awaken the fifth, and take some Nomu with you, he said. If things get out of hand I shall teleport you back. You are needed with us, after all, Garaki told Stain. Stain rolled his eyes but nodded and left the room. Garaki turned back to the subject, and while he didn't show it, on the inside, he was worried. Because if they found the base before the fifth was complete, everything would be ruined, all of it would be for nothing, and all for one's plan, his entire goal, would be for nothing and would come crumbling down. The fifth needed to be awakened. Everything hinged on the fifth. Everything depended on Monoma, the hero, beloved by all. Currently, Kota and Toru were playing on a makeshift training ground that the Pussycats had, and from atop a small cliff, Izuku watched over too, making sure no harm came to them, but while he was watching them, he was being watched by Abara, who looked at the boy with worry after discovering what had truly happened that day on the eclipse. He must truly care for her if he's willing to watch her like a hawk, she thought to herself. Maybe he even loves her, Abara thought. She looked at the boy harder and she could see the expression on his face. While it held worry, there was something akin to happiness in his eyes. Happy to see Toru again despite the state she was in, happy that she seemed to be having a good time. Seeing such an expression on the boy's face while watching Toru, gave her a slight sting to the chest. She had never seen the look on the boy's face before, until now. For the longest time, she had always seen this hateful and emotionless expression on his face. He didn't like anyone in their class, distancing himself from all of them, but that was until he met Mei again and came around to Tetsu. The whole class noticed the slight change and even she did too, but at the time, she didn't care. All she cared about was getting her revenge, but after what happened between them, something changed. She felt more attracted to him, and wanted to get to know him more, and yet, she knew it was for the wrong reasons. When she figured that out, she tried not to think about Izuku or what happened between them, but she couldn't, but she continued to try. But even that was hard because now she saw the boy differently and saw him being different. It was as if she was seeing a glimpse of him, of who he was before the eclipse, before he became what he was now. Abara. Abara was taken out of her thoughts and she turned to see Itsuka, Tetsu, and Awase still discussing what Izuku and Mei had told them. I'm sorry, what were you saying? Abara asked. What I was saying is that it's insane that Izuku survived something like that, Awase told her. Abara nodded. Yes, it is. Itsuka nodded. Been making me wonder what we're getting ourselves into, Itsuka replied. Trying to fight a 100-year-old villain that has multiple quirks along with others just like him that even All Might couldn't beat, is it even worth trying? Of course it is, Tetsu said. Look, I'm not the smartest guy in the block, but even I know better than to just give up before we even tried. We may not stand a chance, but from what Izuku told us, All Might and his mentor beat him one, and we can pick up where they left off. You do know how crazy you sound, right? Awase asked. Abara shook her head. I don't think he's crazy, she chimed in. Itsuka looked at her friend. Really? She asked. You may be right, we're fighting against someone way older than any of us, but we must try, because all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, Abara told them. And I for one cannot sit around and do nothing when someone as evil as All for One exists, Abara said with a furious tone. Itsuka looked and saw the determination on her face, and smiled, wondering what had happened to her that she wanted to help Izuku, but it wasn't her place to ask. Alright, guess, I've got no choice but to help as well, considering how you two are passionate about helping Izuku. Awase smiled as well. Guess I'm in this too, he said. Suddenly, a loud caw was heard and they all looked above to see someone flying up above them, and then suddenly, appearing out of the trees near Kota and Toru, was a large muscular Nomu. Seeing it, Izuku quickly jumped down and raised his sword up to bring it down atop the Nomu's head. However, the Nomu sensed him and slapped him away and he was slammed into the small cliffside. Izuku growled in pain as he got up and saw the Nomu was now focused on him, and realizing this, Izuku looked at Kota. Get out of here, now, he told him. Kota nodded and took Toru away as Izuku charged at the Nomu and raised his sword up as he closed in on the Nomu, but just as he swung his sword, the Nomu jumped back and dodged the attack and Izuku's sword slashed into the ground. However, Izuku then flipped forward and held onto his sword, and as he flipped he took the sword out of the ground and then brought it back down on the Nomu, slicing it down the middle. Izuku was heaving heavily and that's when he felt anger growing inside of him and felt a presence behind him. And he quickly turned around and saw none other than Stain himself, with many other Nomu behind him. Impressive, Stain told him. Stain then sniffed the air. You smell of blood, are you a hero? Izuku looked at Stain with a glare. No, Izuku asked. Stain smiled. Another who stained themselves with blood, Stain told him. I am Stain, the killer of the false heroes. Who are you? Stain asked. Izuku got his sword at the ready and looked at Stain. I'm Izuku, Izuku told him. Stain smiled. You looked like you know how to use that sword and appeared to be rather skilled with it, Stain told him. Are you going to give me a good fight? He asked. Izuku pulled his sword back and took a fighting position. It'll be the last fight you'll ever have, Izuku seethed, letting out a dark aura. Stain grabbed his katana and took a fighting stance as well. Grab the others. They could be useful, Stain ordered. This one's mine. Hearing his order and seeing some of the Nomus run in the direction of the others, Izuku ran toward them to stop them, but Stain appeared right before him and swung at him. However, Izuku blocked the attack with the gauntlet that Mei made for him and the line in the gauntlet glowed red. Izuku then pushed Stain's blade away and then swung his sword with one hand, trying to cut the man in half, but Stain saw the attack incoming and the hero killer jumped up and avoided the attack. Stain landed back on the ground and saw Izuku's back turned to him and was about to stab him, but Izuku's foot met with his face and the hero killer staggered to his right. After regaining his composure, Stain threw 2 daggers at Izuku, but once again, Izuku blocked them with the gauntlet and the red lines glowed again. Izuku smiled, and a new idea formed in his head. Izuku grabbed his sword and ran toward Stain, ready to strike, but Stain saw this and tried to block the attack, but Izuku's blade cut right through his, breaking it and shocking the hero killer. Izuku smiled and then raised his right hand with the gauntlet and aimed it right at Stain. Stain's eyes widened with shock and Izuku fired a shot right into Stain's stomach, blowing his guts out and sending Stain backward. Izuku looked at the gauntlet and smiled. "You really outdone yourself, Mei." Izuku cried with glee. "That is indeed one powerful weapon." Hearing Stain's voice, Izuku's eyes widened with shock and he turned to see the hero killer getting up and the hole in his stomach healing. Izuku growled in anger. "So, you're one of them," Izuku seethed. Stain fully got up and smiled. "Yes," he replied. "And now, I think I'll stop playing around and get serious." Stain then began to transform into his Nomu form, and Izuku's eyes widened with shock. As Stain's Nomu form possessed red and black scales, his arms became sharp as blades and his mouth was wide with sharp teeth and a long tongue. "Let's fight until the other falls," Stain cried. Izuku glared and prepared himself, knowing that he was in trouble as Stain wasn't like other mindless Nomu, and while he may not be one of the 5, he was sure to be more dangerous than other Nomu he had faced before. Stain took a running stance and ran toward Izuku with great speed, and Izuku focused on him, waiting for the right moment to strike. As Stain closed in, Izuku swung and at the same time, Stain did the same with his bladed arm. Stain's side was split open but was already regenerating and the side of Izuku's head was cut, but thankfully not as deep as Stain's was. Both turned back around and looked at the other with fierce glares. However, Stain was smiling and Izuku was furious. "You survived. I'm impressed," Stain cried. "Tell me your name, hero," Stain cried. "Izuku Midoriya," Izuku told him, taking a fighting stance with Apollyon. Stain's eyes widened with surprise before he smiled. "So, you're the one who survived the eclipse?" Stain asked. "If you can survive that, I only hope you can survive this fight." Izuku gripped Apollyon and prepared to continue the fight with Stain, knowing that things were going to get harder. With the others, they were dealing with many different types of Nomu that Stain had brought with them. Awase forged a pole and managed to daze a few as they walked around in a dazed state, but they regained themselves and ran to attack him again, but before they could all were struck in the brain by darts and they fell dead. Awase turned around to see Mei with a gadget on her arm and she reloaded darts into the contraption. She looked at Awase with a bit of a glare. "Don't try and knock them out. Just kill them. They aren't human," Mei cried. Mei turned around and fired at another one that was coming toward her and he turned back to see another Nomu coming toward him. Instead of trying to hit the Nomu in the chest, he pulled his pole back and thrust it forward into Nomu's brain, smashing it and killing the creature. Seeing it die and bleed causing him to freeze up for a moment before he heard the cries of Toru and saw a medium-sized Nomu walking toward her and Kota. Kota tried to stop it only for it to shove him away, and seeing him be shoved to the ground, Toru screamed and tried to help him only for the Nomu to grab her and hold her tight as she squirmed. "Shit," Awase cried as he quickly ran toward the Nomu, swung his pole down on its head, and killed it. Toru was let go and she rushed to Kota's side and helped him up. Awase turned toward them to help them only to be kicked in the face by a Nomu with wings and sent to the ground unconscious. "No," Kota cried and rushed to Awase's unconscious form as did Toru. However, the Nomu with wings turned back around in the air, saw the two, and flew back down. As it closed in, it opened his hands to grab one of them. However, out of nowhere, Tetsu appeared and punched the Nomu in the face, sending it to the ground and away from the two. Tetsu turned around to the two with a concerned look. "Get back to the lodge, quick," he cried. However, the winged Nomu tackled Tetsu to the ground and tried to claw his face, but the young teen held him back. Kota and Toru ran past the two and ran toward the lodge, but the winged Nomu was not letting them go as it flew up with Tetsu into the air. The metal-skinned teen punched the Nomu a few times and becoming annoyed. The Nomu let him go, but the teen acted fast and grabbed onto its feet as it flew down back toward Toru and Kota and as they were close to the ground. Tetsu slammed his feet into the ground and tried to slow down the Nomu, but it was too powerful and too fast, and instead of stopping it, his feet dragged along the dirt before he was dragged across the ground like a doll. Eventually, he let go and the Nomu flew straight at Kota and Toru, and they heard the Nomu's cry and they turned around to see the beast coming toward them. Protecting the younger boy, Toru pushed him out of the way as the Nomu grabbed her, flew her up into the sky, and flew back toward the base. Kota saw this and his eyes widened with fear as he stood up and ran after the flying Nomu. Toru! He cried, "Hang on!" Kota tried to chase after her, but he himself was grabbed by another Nomu and it too tried to take him away in the same direction Toru was taken. However, a tart was shot into its eye and it cried in pain. The creature's attention turned toward Mei, who looked disheveled and had some blood on her clothes. The pink-haired girl glared at the Nomu. "Put him down," Mei ordered. The Nomu roared at her and the Nomu then threw Kota to the ground hard, and the boy helped in pain as he saw the Nomu run at her. Mei quickly aimed her gadget at the beast, but she failed to notice it wasn't loaded until it was too late. She heard the empty click of her gadget and the Nomu had already closed in and it grabbed a hold of her and threw her into the ground, causing Mei to cry out in pain as she spat out blood. Before the Nomu could do more, millions of vine wrapped around its torso and arms, constricting the creature's movement. From behind the tied-up Nomu, two large hands appeared and were brought together in a loud slap, crushing the Nomu's head. Abara ran to Mei's side and helped her up. "Are you okay?" Abara asked. Mei slowly nodded. I'm fine," she told her. But they have Toru." One of them flew off with Toru. Hearing this, Abara's eyes widened with horror and she quickly searched the sky for the Nomu but saw that it was far in the distance, and she cursed to herself. "We need to follow it," Abara cried. Stock shook her head. "We can't, it's too far. We wouldn't be able to keep up," she cried. Mei knew Itsuka was right in knowing what she needed to do. The support student quickly searched through a few pouches in her pockets and found what she was looking for and looked at the two other girls. "We need to put one of these on one of the Nomu," she said. In her hand was a device about the size of a 500 yen coin and was black. Figuring out what it was, Abara took it from her and set Mei down before seeing a Nomu that was heading toward the unconscious body of Awase. Before it could grab him and take him away, she jumped at it and quickly wrapped her vines around the Nomu's body to hold it still. She then pulled herself toward the Nomu's back and placed the small device on the Nomu's back. As she did this, Tetsu grabbed Awase and took him away, and seeing that her friend was away from the Nomu's clutches, she moved away from the Nomu and released her vines from the Nomu. Yet, while she was done with it, the creature was not done with her and turned around and Abara glared at the beast, knowing it was now going to target her. "I can't kill it. If I do, we won't be able to find where the other one took Toru," Abara thought. The Nomu tried to attack her but Abara used her vines to quickly evade the attack and she was now back with Mei, with an unconscious Awase next to her. Alongside Abara were both Itsuka and Tetsu, and the three saw that there were still quite a few Nomus around them. The three fighters were worried they were going to be overwhelmed, but suddenly, black goo appeared from each of the creatures' mouths and they were being consumed by it. "What's going on?" Itsuka asked. "I don't know," Tetsu replied. Meanwhile, a few minutes before, Izuku and Stain were across from each other. Izuku was covered in cuts and he was breathing heavily as he leaned on his sword. Across from her was Stain, who was bisected and seemed to be regenerating slower. I don't know how long I can keep this up," Izuku cried as he glared at the hero killer. "But I can't lose. Not when she's here. I have to keep her safe," Izuku cried. Stain sat up and saw that his waist was still regenerating and groaned. "It seems I've spent up too much energy and my regeneration is slowing down. I need to retreat," Stain thought. "Doctor, if you can hear me, get me out of here. The situation here has become dire," he told the doctor through his earpiece. "Understood. Hopefully, some of the Nomu have taken at least a few of them," Garaki said. Suddenly, black goo appeared out of Stain's mouth and he was consumed by it. Seeing this and quickly knowing what was happening, he rushed at the man, hoping to bring his sword down on his head before he was teleported away, but Stain was quicker and threw a dagger at Izuku. The dagger struck and stabbed into Izuku's left leg and the pain caused Izuku to misstep and fall to the ground. Izuku growled in pain and quickly got back up only to see Stain be consumed by the goo and disappear. Izuku growled in anger as he took the dagger out from his leg and got up. His focus quickly snapped to Toru and the others and he raced back toward the lodge. He passed where he was sure the others fought the Nomu and saw some of their bodies, but still ran toward the lodge. Once there, he saw Mei getting a bandage wrapped around her ribs and also saw Awase with a bandage around his head as he lay on one of the benches. As for Kota, he thankfully only needed one bandage around his arm and a few band-aids on his legs. He looked around for Toru but didn't see her in sight, and his worries began to fill his head and a horrified and desperate look formed on his face. "Where's Toru?" he asked. Mei looked at him with a sad look. "Izuku. I'm sorry," she said with a sad tone. Izuku's fear became a reality and he was frozen in horror as he felt a stab to his heart, feeling that he had failed Toru a second time. Despite this, he steeled himself and turned and left, not saying a word. Abara went to go after him but Itsuka stopped her, telling her with just a look to leave him be. Abara did so, but a worried expression graced her features as she watched her forest-haired classmate walk into the forest, not knowing what he was going to do. Dr. Garaki walked over to a table where an unconscious Toru lay tied down. Garaki smiled down at her, surprised to see her again, as he remembered her from the eclipse and couldn't help but think this was fate. He then looked over to the pod where the fifth was contained. Of course, it was once Nito Monoma, but to still call it that and to even still call it human was a foolish notion. If anything, the fifth was different than just a simple Nomu, much different than himself and the other three God Hand. The fifth was different. The fifth was something that was not going to be controlled, should he betray them for his own goals. And with that thought, Garaki realized that something needed to be done about that. After all for One always had plans to take care of those who could betray him and whose hearts could be easily swayed. And while the God Hand were supposed to be his most loyal followers, they all had their own goals and the only reason the other two haven't betrayed them is because their goals coincide with the foe's goals, but the goal of the fifth was to be the savior of Japan, to be a shining light like All Might, and while he could achieve that with the plan they have for him, he could still betray them. He then looked back at Toru and an evil thought formed inside of his head, and he smiled. Who would have thought someone such as yourself would be so useful? Toru Hagakure, Garaki thought sinisterly. The pros had returned and once they did, they discovered what had ensued moments ago. They were appalled and felt terrible that they nearly cost the young students' lives by not being there, and felt more awful when they heard about Toru being taken, more so the Pussycats, but Mei had brought up good news as she had told Abara to place a small tracking device on one of the Nomu, which Abara confirmed she did. With this news, the pros felt better as they now had a way to track the villain's base down and bring an end to whatever plans they had, but this time, they would be bringing the students with them, leaving Mei and Kota at the base. Hearing that she would be staying behind, Mei looked angry. "I should come along," she cried as she looked at Izuku. "Toru's my friend too." Izuku looked at her. "I know, Mei, but you're not a fighter and we need you here to contact the outside world in case something happens," Izuku told her. "I promise, I'll bring her back safe." Mei nodded in defeat and then she looked down. "I'm sorry, Izuku," she said in a low tone. "I should have done something more," she said. Izuku shook his head. "Mei, it's not your fault," he said. Mei let out a sigh and turned away to join Kota inside the lodge. Izuku looked at her and felt terrible. Deep down, a small part of him did blame Mei for Toru being captured, but he knew that was wrong. Mei had done her best to protect her and it was thanks to her and her quick thinking that they could find her in the love. "She's hard on herself just like you are." Izuku turned around to see Guts looking at him. "You forget sometimes that you weren't the only one who suffered that day," Guts said. "She lost the same people as you did and that's why she works so hard to help you because when she helps you, she feels as if she's helping you save people. That she's getting a chance to save Toru," Guts told him. Izuku looked at him and sighed. "I feel like an ass," he said. Guts nodded. "Good," he told Izuku. "Now get ready, we're leaving as soon as possible," Guts told him. Izuku nodded and then quickly realized something. "Wait, how are we getting there?" he asked. "Atop Ryaku," Guts replied. "The plan is once we arrive at the location, the heroes and I will be dealing with any Nomu, the distraction, while you and the rest of the students will be rescuing the civilians that have been taken. you and them will be the most important part of this plan, Guts said. Izuku nodded and turned to go tell the others about what was going to happen when they got there. As he walked, Izuku couldn't help but feel the presence of the bunny, nipping at the back of his head. He knew what it wanted. He knew it wanted to simply abandon Toru to her fate and seek out Monoma to take revenge. But he wasn't going to give it to the beast. He wasn't going to go back to how he was, not when he had Toru save. They all got atop the Dragon Hero and Ryaku took off in the direction the tracker was located, and after a 30-minute flight, they arrived near the secret base and Ryaku lowered the students down a few feet away from it. While they were going to attack directly and draw out as many Nomu as they could, and the students wished them luck and the heroes then flew off while the students looked at each other and formed a plan. Itsuka looked at them all. Remember, our mission is to infiltrate the building and save the civilians, nothing else, she said, turning to Izuku, Abara, and Tetsu. Can you three take the front? Izuku's fought these things before. Abara can use her vines to stop them before they reach us, and Tetsu, you can be our shield in case they have some long-range quirks, she said. The three nodded in agreement. Izuku then looked to the others. I should let you all know that some of these things come with regeneration. Some are slower at regenerating, others are quick, even if they don't have regeneration. Kill them, Izuku told them. Don't aim for anywhere else, straight for the head, got it? He asked. They all nodded. Izuku nodded back. I'm also not going to sugarcoat it. Some of them have intelligence and personality. Don't let that stop you. Kill them, he said. They all nodded again, but a sense of dread filled them. One thing they also discovered about Nomu from Izuku was that they were reanimated corpses of people, and while most if not all were mindless beasts, some were smarter and more intelligent, making them somewhat human. However, Izuku was right. They couldn't let that stop them. On a mission like this, they had to choose. Live or die. The choice was easy. The students ran toward the base and when they did, they heard the sounds of fighting taking place. From a distance they saw the fighting happening, and they heard the roars and cries of the Nomu as they charged at the heroes, and Izuku heard the firing of Guts' cannon, but they quickly made their way to the base and thankfully, saw an entrance made by a body of a dead Nomu. Izuku and Tetsu quickly moved the body and then they all went inside to rescue Toru and the other civilians. As they rushed down the corridor they found themselves in when they entered, Izuku was surprised that no Nomu had come at them yet, which made him very suspicious. Either the person running this place hasn't noticed us yet, or we're heading for a trap, Izuku thought. Suddenly, there was a ding that rang across the entire hallway and they stopped, wondering what that sound meant and what was going to happen next, as they quickly went on guard. Hello there children, welcome to where the greatest creations are born, came a voice over some speakers. Setsuna had a worried look on her face. Who the hell is that? She asked. Izuku's expression hardened into a glare. Garaki, he seethed. Awase looked at Izuku with a raised brow. Who? The fucker that created the Nomus, he said. Itsuka glared. So this sick bastard was most likely the one who attacked us, she said. Izuku nodded. Yeah, he said coldly. Ah, if it isn't Izuku Midoriya. My, what an odd turn of events. First Toru Hager and now you. It's like you're here for a reunion with an old friend, Garaki said over the speakers. Izuku was confused. What the hell are you going on about? Where is Toru? Izuku asked. Garaki chuckled over the speakers. Don't worry, the girl is safe. I won't harm a hair on her, Garaki said, but as I said, it's like fate, for you three to be here in one place. Izuku quickly realized what he was referring to and glared. So he is here. Izuku thought. If he's here, I'll kill him, Izuku seethed. You can try, Garaki told him with an amused tone. For now, enjoy the little friends I'm sending your way. The speakers turned off and the group heard a roar and looked ahead of them. That's when they saw a few Nomu appearing from around the corner and rushing toward them, but thankfully, none of them seemed to be too powerful. Izuku rushed to the front, charging at the Nomus, and when he got close, he quickly swung, cutting them in half. More charge at Izuku, but before they can grab him, vines shoot at them and pierce their brains, sending them back. Izuku turned around to see Ibara had helped kill the Nomu, and Izuku pulled back before swinging again, tearing through another Nomu. Tetsu and Itsuka rushed forward to help Izuku. Itsuka enlarged her fist and quickly slammed some Nomu against the wall, before enlarging her other fist to crush their heads. Tetsu charged at a Nomu with a tail, and when it saw him coming, it swung its tail to trip him, but he jumped over it, launched himself forward, and grabbed its brain before ripping it out and squishing it. A few Nomu slipped past them and charged at Setsuna and Awase. The two quickly acted as Setsuna split apart in order to dodge an attack and launched her fist to strike the Nomu in the brain, stunning it and giving Awase the chance to bash the brains in with a staff he forged with some metal he had on him. The entire group fought through the group of Nomu in order to continue forward because nothing was going to stop them from rescuing the civilians and saving Toru. Nothing was going to stop Izuku, because now, he was going to save Toru, and he was going to stop Garaki and Monoma. Back outside, the heroes were dealing with far tougher Nomu, but thankfully, a few of the heroes didn't have a problem with the Nomu as some did. Guts was one of these people. He cut through Nomu like a hot knife through butter, and completely eradicated some with his cannon arm. For him, it was easy. He had been fighting these things for a long time, and while some would give him a hard time, the fodder was never as bad as the high-ends he used to fight. As if a sixth sense went off, Guts felt something dangerous behind him, and quickly turned around only to block the attack from a Namufeed Stain. Stain's arms had gone back to being blades and he glared at Guts. "You remind me of a boy I fought mere moments ago. Are you his teacher?" Stain asked. Guts smiled at Stain. "If I am?" he asked. Stain then smiled back. "Then I wanna see what the teacher of such a beast can do." Stain cried. Guts then quickly kicked Stain away before quickly pulling the Dragonslayer back, ready to cut Stain in half. However, Stain quickly jumped out of the way as the other man brought down his massive sword. Stain quickly landed and charged in to stab Guts, but the other man reacted faster and used his iron arm to block the stab, and quickly kicked Stain in the stomach, sending the hero killer back and falling to the ground. Stain quickly got up and took a fighting stance with his bladed arms and saw that Guts himself was also taking a fighting stance. Stain smiled. "Amazing. This man fights as if it was all he did his entire life. This man was bred to fight." Stain cried to himself with glee, "What a wonderful opportunity to test myself." Guts took a quick look around and saw that there were still plenty of Nomu coming and fighting the heroes and knew that this couldn't go on. "Right now, we're playing an act, baiting as many out of the lab as we can to give Izuku and the others time to save the civilians, but we can't keep this up for long," Guts said. "Worse, if we don't finish this soon, that thing is going to be released, and we can't let that happen." Dr. Garaki smiled as he walked past a sleeping Toru. "Thank you, Toru Hokage. Your DNA will prove useful for what I have planned should the fifth become too much of a problem," he said as he left the room. Garaki then walked into where he was keeping the rest of his test subjects and he looked at the pod where the sludge villain was still hitting himself against the glass of his pod. "Why won't they stop? Why won't they just fucking stop screaming?" he cried. "God save me. Save me." Suddenly, the pod opened and the sludge villain was stabbed by Garaki's fingers. The doctor was using all for one to transfer the final quirk to the sludge villain. Garaki smiled wickedly as he gave a copy of New Order to the sludge villain. "Now, go on and consume before giving yourself to the fifth," he said with a sinister tone. With that order, the sludge villain moved past Garaki and quickly moved to the other pods and opened them before consuming the other test subjects and growing in size as he did. As Garaki watched the monstrosity he had just unleashed eat and grow, he could not help but smile, as this was every scientist's dream, watching something new and amazing unfold before them, and he would await eagerly for the end results. Suddenly, muck appeared out of his mouth and quickly began to cover him before he disappeared. "We eagerly await you to find us and start the beginning of our plan, Nito Monoma," Garaki thought as he teleported away. "And thank you Toru Hokage, you'll be the ace up my sleeve should the time come when the fifth is the enemy of all humanity. Once again, I want to apologize for the long wait for this chapter. I don't mean to keep you all waiting, however, IRL things have kept me increasingly busy recently. With my apartment redecorated and fixed, my job is working me harder and harder each day. I try to write as much as possible for this story and others, but as you can see, my posting of chapters has become more spaced. Again, I apologize for my recent lack of writing and for keeping you all waiting. I know you all are eager to read more and more, and I thank you for your support and enthusiasm. I can't promise that things will go back to how they used to be, with me posting chapters more frequently, but I promise to always get a chapter out sooner or later, and I promise to keep you all updated on things, such as if I have writer's block or decided to take a break, but nothing of the sort will happen yet, it's simply life getting in the way. Again, thank you all for understanding and I hope you have a good day, night. As Nomu attempted to slink away, Izuku's blade descended with force, cleaving through its skull and reducing it to a gruesome pulp. The hallway they had traversed was littered with the lifeless forms of Nomu, testaments to the ferocity of their battle. Each group member appeared worn and weary, their breaths labored from the relentless pursuit through what seemed like a twisted laboratory corridor, where Nomu lurked at every twist and turn. Some proved to be mere nuisances, while others demanded the collective effort of the team to kill. Do you reckon that's the end of them? Itsuka gasped, her chest heaving with exhaustion. Izuku, too, struggled to catch his breath. I can't say for sure, he replied, his tone grave. In my experience, these creatures are like vermin, there's always more lurking in the shadows. Let's pray we find the civilians soon, Tetsu remarked, his voice tinged with urgency. If we don't make it out of here soon, we're as good as done for. Izuku nodded in agreement. Agreed, he replied, let's move on down this corridor and see if we can locate the people who were taken, he declared, determination etched into his features. They all exchanged silent nods of agreement, their footsteps echoing down the hallway under Izuku's lead. Encountering more Nomu along the way, they were relieved to find them less formidable than their previous adversaries. They efficiently dispatched what they assumed were stragglers before reaching a room at the end of the hallway. Awase, frustrated by the locked door, groaned as he stepped back, then delivered a forceful kick with his right foot, breaking it open. As they rushed inside, they were met with a startling sight, civilians trapped behind glass cells, each young hero shocked by the sheer number of people. Upon realizing their mission to save them, the civilians, faces lit up with grateful smiles, pleading to be freed. Itsuka, acting swiftly, attempted to operate the controls, only to find them unresponsive. Frustration dripped from her words as she declared the malfunction. Itsuka groaned in frustration. Damn! She cried. None of the controls are working. The cell doors won't open. She cried. Recognizing Garaki's interference, Izuku growled in frustration. Garaki did it, he said. Bastard wanted to make it hard for us. Stepping forward, Abara utilized her quirk to grow her hair, which dug deep into the walls of every cell. Move back, she said. They all stood behind her as Abara poured every ounce of strength into her quirk and ripped the cells apart, freeing the civilians. The civilians quickly rushed to the students, looking for guidance to escape this wretched place. Itsuka stepped forward, rallying the crowd. Everyone follow me, we know the way out. Don't let anyone get left behind, she cried. Abara, Tetsu, Setsuna, guard the front, Izuku, Awase, and I will guard the rear, she said. Setsuna nodded. You got it, big sis. Setsuna replied. The three led the crowd out of the room, with the other three making sure no one got trampled over and that there wasn't any surprise from the back. Izuku. Hearing his voice, Izuku turned to look at the civilians and instantly recognized the person calling out. It was Toru's aunt, Luka. Izuku's eyes widened with astonishment. Luka, he cried out. Is Toru with you? He asked with hope. However, the woman shook her head. No, she cried with worry. I thought she got away. She cried. Izuku shook his head and explained what had happened, and Luka's face turned to absolute horror. You have to find her, Izuku. Luka pleaded. Please. Izuku nodded. I promise, he said. Now get going with the others. Quickly, he cried. Luka did as she was told and ran out of the room with the final gaggle of civilians. Izuku, Itsuka, and Awase followed after them, a few feet behind the large group. However, as they were making their way down and past a few of the hallways, the young UA students each caught glimpses of something, devouring the bodies of the deceased Nomu. Awase glanced behind him, and his eyes widened with shock. Behind him and his friends, a sludge-like substance was absorbing the carcasses of the Nomu and quickly gaining on their tail. Guys, behind us, he cried. Itsuka and Izuku turned around only to see the very sigh that shook their classmate. "What in the world is that?" Itsuka cried in horror. "Don't know. Don't care. Just keep running," he cried. As they continued to make their way to the exit, Izuku looked around rapidly, trying to find a room where he was sure Toru would be kept. If she wasn't with the civilians, she had to be in some test room, and perhaps he was, too. Suddenly, as the sludge behind them grew more prominent with each passing moment, the underground lab shook and crumbled around them. "Damn it," Izuku thought. "If this keeps up, I'll never find Toru," he cried to himself. As they ran past one room, Izuku heard crying and groaning, which sounded familiar. Without hesitation, Izuku stopped and quickly turned back around, running back to the room just as the sludge approached them. Seeing him turning around, Itsuka grew confused and worried. "Midoriya!" she cried out. "I found Toru. Go, I'll catch up," he quickly said. Izuku busted the door open, and once inside the room, his eyes quickly fell on Toru, who was strapped down to a chair. She cried and whined as she struggled against her restraints. Izuku quickly acted and went for the straps that held her down, unbuckling them and picking her up, bridal style. However, just as he was about to go to the door, he saw the sludge entering the room. His glare expressed anger as a bead of sweat fell from his face. "Shit," Izuku said in a slightly defeated tone. The sludge surged into the room with alarming speed, causing Izuku to whirl around in a panic. Reacting instinctively, he dropped to his knees, enveloping Toru in a protective embrace, shielding her from whatever impending danger lurked within the sludge's form. To their astonishment, the sludge seemed to pay them no heed. Instead, it gathered around a pod behind them, a detail that had escaped Izuku's notice until now. As the sludge enveloped the pod, its demeanor shifted, its form quivering with an unexpected reverence. The slime's eyes, if one could call them that, gazed upon the pod's contents with a passion that spoke of awe and wonder, as if staring at something of profound significance. Amid chaos and uncertainty, this unexpected display of reverence from the sludge left Izuku momentarily bewildered, his mind racing to comprehend the significance of the mysterious pod and its contents. "So lovely," the slime uttered distortedly, echoing eerily through the room. Izuku strained to glimpse the pod and its mysterious contents, but the sludge obscured his view as an impenetrable barrier. Frustration gnawed at him, but he knew there was no time to dwell on the enigma before him. With determination fueling his actions, Izuku swiftly rose to his feet, his mind set on reuniting with the group and ensuring everyone's safety. As he exited the room, a sense of urgency gripped him, urging him forward. However, his departure was interrupted by a sudden, ominous sound, the sludge slamming onto the pod with a deafening impact. In an instant, the viscous substance began to seep through the tiny crevices of the pod, its dark tendrils intertwining with whatever lay within. A shiver of unease raced down Izuku's spine as he watched the unsettling scene unfold. Though he couldn't discern the exact nature of the pod's contents, the ominous fusion between the sludge and whatever lay inside hinted at something far more sinister. With a foreboding lingering in the air, Izuku quickened his pace, his heart heavy with the weight of unanswered questions and the looming threat of the unknown. As that was happening, Izuku managed to catch up with the others as they were nearing the exit, and just as they were, the entire place shook more violently than before. The violent rumble of the place caused cracks in the wall and pieces of the ceiling to fall. Setsuna grumbled at the destruction that was now occurring. "What the hell is going on? Does that wacko have some self-destruct sequence or something?" she cried as she ran. Abara's gaze turned to her classmate. "If what Izuku said about these people is true, I would not doubt they did indeed have a plan to erase this entire base from existence," she said. At last, they reached the lab's exit, retracing their steps back to where they had entered. As they emerged into the fading light of dusk, the sight that greeted them was far from comforting. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the scene, but what caught their attention was the ongoing struggle that unfolded before them. Despite their ordeal within the lab, they were met with heroes still locked in fierce combat with the remaining Nomu and a handful of villains. The air crackled with tension when suddenly, a deafening explosion reverberated through the air, originating from the lab's depths. Setsuna sprang into action, swiftly detaching her mouth from her face and sending it hovering above the chaos. "Everyone, evacuate the area," Setsuna's voice pierced through the chaos, her urgent plea echoing. "The base is gonna blow." Her words sent a jolt of panic through the assembled heroes, who wasted no time heeding her warning. They scrambled to retreat, urgency driving their movements as they raced to safety. At that moment, as he retreated, Guts silently prayed that everyone had made it out alive, his hope resting on the shoulders of Izuku and his comrades. They were the last line of defense against the looming threat, and Guts could only trust that they had the strength and resolve to stop whatever disaster awaited them, even if it meant facing it head-on. Meanwhile, the Nomu stood frozen in confusion, their vacant eyes scanning the chaos around them. However, upon hearing the young student's proclamation, Stain's attention snapped toward the base, a malevolent grin stretching across his lips. "So, you've finally made your move," the hero killer mused, anticipation flickering in his eyes. As if in response to his thoughts, the lab erupted into an explosion, flames licking at the air and shockwaves rippling through the surrounding area. Debris was hurled into the sky, casting ominous shadows over the chaos below. Large chunks of rubble rained down indiscriminately, striking Nomu, heroes, villains, and civilians alike with devastating force. The aftermath was catastrophic, leaving behind a trail of destruction and carnage. Amidst the chaos, cries of pain and anguish pierced the air as injured and fallen individuals lay sprayed across the battlefield. It was a grim reckoning for the villains, with some meeting their demise under the weight of the falling debris. However, as the dust settled and the debris cleared, the UA students stood victorious, successfully rescuing the civilians and stopping the villains' plans. Their base lay in ruins, and the Nomu they once commanded now lay lifeless. The day seemed to be saved, or so they thought. Amidst the wreckage, a lone figure emerged. His once short blonde hair now cascaded past his shoulders, and his piercing blue eyes shimmered with renewed determination. Clad in nothing but the form-fitting suit provided to him by the doctor, Monoma stood tall, a symbol of resilience amidst the chaos. Surveying the scene before him, Monoma watched as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the destruction. With a serene smile, he spoke, his voice carrying an air of quiet resolve. "Today marks the end of what once was," he began, his words tinged with anticipation. "But tomorrow marks the beginning of my journey to fulfill my dreams. Everyone, evacuate the area." Setsuna's voice pierced through the chaos, her urgent plea echoing. "The base is gonna blow." Her words sent a jolt of panic through the assembled heroes, who wasted no time heeding her warning. They scrambled to retreat, urgency driving their movements as they raced to safety. At that moment, as he retreated, Guts silently prayed that everyone had made it out alive, his hope resting on the shoulders of Izuku and his comrades. They were the last line of defense against the looming threat, and Guts could only trust that they had the strength and resolve to stop whatever disaster awaited them, even if it meant facing it head-on. Meanwhile, the Nomu stood frozen in confusion, their vacant eyes scanning the chaos around them. However, upon hearing the young student's proclamation, Stain's attention snapped toward the base, a malevolent grin stretching across his lips. "So, you've finally made your move," the hero killer mused, anticipation flickering in his eyes. As if in response to his thoughts, the lab erupted into an explosion, flames licking at the air and shockwaves rippling through the surrounding area. Debris was hurled into the sky, casting ominous shadows over the chaos below. Large chunks of rubble rained down indiscriminately, striking Nomu, heroes, villains, and civilians alike with devastating force. The aftermath was catastrophic, leaving behind a trail of destruction and carnage. Amidst the chaos, cries of pain and anguish pierced the air as injured and fallen individuals lay sprayed across the battlefield. It was a grim reckoning for the villains, with some meeting their demise under the weight of the falling debris. However, as the dust settled and the debris cleared, the UA students stood victorious, successfully rescuing the civilians and stopping the villains' plans. Their base lay in ruins, and the Nomu they once commanded now lay lifeless. The day seemed to be saved, or so they thought. Everyone's gaze snapped to the sky as a massive explosion ripped through the air, the deafening sound echoing across the landscape. The blast's force had sent up a towering column of smoke, so dense and vast that it blotted out the sun. For a moment, no one moved, their eyes locked on the swirling clouds of ash and debris that now dominated the horizon. The world seemed to hold its breath, frozen in the eerie stillness that followed the cataclysm. It was Itsuka who finally broke the spell, her voice cutting through the silence with a sharp urgency. "All right, we need to move. Get everyone back to the lodge, now," she commanded, her tone brooking no argument. The group snapped back to reality, nodding in agreement as they turned to follow her lead. The heroes remained behind, locked in battle with the remaining Nomu and villains, their struggle continuing amidst the chaos. Just as Izuku was about to follow, something caught his eye. He noticed Guts, standing atop a large rock not far from them, his silhouette stark against the fiery sky. Guts's stance was tense, his arm outstretched as he pointed back toward the billowing smoke cloud. Izuku hesitated, confused by his mentor's behavior. The sun was low on the horizon, its golden rays casting long shadows and making it difficult to see clearly, but Guts's intent was unmistakable. He was trying to show them something. Izuku squinted against the light, straining to see through the smoke. When he finally did, his heart skipped a beat, his eyes widening in shock. Something, or someone, was emerging from the smoke, a shadowy figure slowly taking shape within the dark cloud. Amidst the wreckage of the battlefield, a lone figure emerged from the thick haze of dust and smoke, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around. Izuku's breath caught in his throat as his gaze locked onto the figure's face, a face he hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. The once short, unruly blonde hair that used to frame Monoma's sharp features now cascaded past his shoulders in a golden wave. His piercing blue eyes, which had once held a mischievous glint, now shone with a fierce and unyielding determination, a resolve that seemed to burn brighter than the flames licking at the debris around him. Clad in nothing but a sleek, form-fitting suit that seemed almost unnatural in its perfection, he stood tall and unyielding, as if he were the eye of the storm itself. There was a strange calm about him, an eerie tranquility that made him seem untouched by the chaos that raged around them. Monoma's presence was like a beacon, drawing all eyes to him, heroes and villains alike, as if the world had suddenly shifted on its axis, making him the center of everything. Abara, sensing Izuku's sudden stillness, followed his gaze. Her breath hitched as she too recognized the figure standing amidst the ruins. Around them, the battlefield fell into an uneasy silence, the ongoing skirmishes halting as both Nomu and heroes turned their attention to the blonde figure. The air grew heavy, charged with a tension that made it hard to breathe. It was as if time itself had stopped, forcing everyone to focus solely on the enigma that was Monoma. For that brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Monoma," Izuku whispered, the name barely escaping his lips, yet the weight of it echoed in the stillness. Abara turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. Suddenly, the ground trembled as Stain, now grotesquely transformed, and a massive winged Nomu appeared beside Monoma. The monstrous beings bowed low before him, a display of reverence that sent a chill down Izuku's spine. Without a word, Monoma acknowledged them, moving with a fluid grace as he mounted the winged Nomu, his movements precise and controlled. The creature launched itself into the air, its powerful wings beating against the wind, lifting Monoma skyward. Stain followed closely, his own twisted form now boasting a pair of dark, leathery wings. As they ascended into the sky, the spell broke, and the battlefield erupted back into chaos. But the image of Monoma, the calm at the center of the storm, lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed it, a haunting reminder of the power he now commanded. Without a second thought, a surge of raw anger and hatred ignited within Izuku. His eyes narrowed into a feral glare as he charged forward, every muscle in his body coiled with intent. "Ah, ooh, ah," a sudden cry cut through the haze of his fury. Izuku's steps faltered as he turned his head to see Toru, her hand outstretched toward him, her eyes wide with fear and desperation. His breath hitched, the intensity of his emotions clashing within him. He wanted nothing more than to chase after them, to make them pay for everything they had done. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to keep going, to unleash the storm brewing inside. But then, a quieter voice whispered through the chaos, he had come to save her. He had achieved that. Toru was safe now, and that was what mattered most. He exhaled a long, heavy sigh, letting the tension drain from his body. Slowly, he turned back, his gaze lingering on Toru before he nodded to himself, decision made. The others, too, were emerging from the fog of their trance, rallying to guide the terrified citizens away from the devastation. Together, they moved with purpose, heading toward the safety of the Pussycats lodge as the remaining heroes engaged the last of the Nomu. It was clear the battle wouldn't last much longer. The Nomu left behind were hardly a match for the seasoned heroes. 15 minutes later, the heroes had subdued the Nomu and rejoined the students and civilians. But something gnawed at Izuku's mind. He scanned the crowd, searching for one face in particular. Guts was nowhere to be seen. A flicker of worry crossed Izuku's features, but he reminded himself of Guts's strength and experience. The older man could handle himself, Izuku was sure of that. Even so, a seed of unease took root in his heart as they continued on their way. When the heroes finally regrouped with the students, Yukio stepped forward, offering to transport the civilians to the nearest hospital. She promised to fly slowly and carefully, ensuring their safety, and the civilians readily agreed. A few heroes joined her, hovering close by to secure the passengers, making sure no one would fall during the flight. Meanwhile, the Pussycats contacted Forest Rescue, who quickly arranged for cars and ambulances to meet them at a nearby dirt road, just a short distance from their current location. With the immediate crisis under control, the students were instructed to return to the lodge. The relief in the air was palpable. Exhaustion weighed heavily on their shoulders after battling what had seemed like an endless swarm of smaller Nomu. They were grateful for the chance to finally rest, knowing they had done their part in protecting the civilians. They had walked for what felt like an eternity, their steps heavy with exhaustion as they made their way back to the lodge. The forest around them had already surrendered to the night, the dense canopy above casting long, eerie shadows that danced in the pale glow of the full moon. Its light spilled over the landscape, bathing the lodge in an ethereal silver hue, as if the entire world had been dipped in starlight. As they approached the lodge, the warm glow from the windows seemed to beckon them home, a beacon of safety after their long journey. Kota, ever the vigilant child, was still awake, his small figure silhouetted against the light as he waited at the door. The moment he spotted them, he didn't hesitate. He dashed forward, his little legs carrying him straight to Toru. Without a word, he flung his arms around her, holding on with all his might. Toru, despite her fatigue, responded instantly, scooping him up and wrapping him in a tight, protective embrace. Just as Toru held Kota close, Mei came barreling down the steps from the lodge. Her face was a mixture of joy and relief, tears spilling freely as she raced towards them. Without hesitation, she enveloped both Izuku and Toru in a fierce hug, her emotions overflowing. Izuku could feel the trembling in her shoulders, a silent testament to the depth of her feelings. He and Toru hugged her back just as tightly, grounding her in the reality that they were here, safe, and together. When the hug finally broke, Mei stepped back, still crying, yet her smile was radiant. She looked at them with a mix of excitement and disbelief, her eyes wide with wonder. "Why, you guys won't believe this. Just wait and see," Mei stammered through her tears, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. Izuku exchanged a bewildered glance with Toru, his mind racing to understand what could have brought Mei to this state. But before he could ask, a voice broke through the night, clear and familiar. "Izuku, it's good to see you." Izuku's breath caught in his throat as he turned towards the source of the voice. His eyes widened in shock, and beside him, Toru gasped softly. Standing there, bathed in the moon's gentle light, was Monoma, still dressed in his skin-tight suit, a soft smile playing on his lips. Mei sniffled, her smile trembling as she tried to speak through the flood of emotions. "It's Monoma. Izuku, it's," her voice faltered as she caught sight of Izuku's expression. His face was contorted with rage, a raw, unfiltered fury that radiated from him like a blazing inferno. The air around him seemed to crackle with the intensity of his emotions as his eyes locked onto the source of his pain, Monoma. The memories of all the suffering, all the hurt, and most of all, Toru's condition, flashed through his mind like a tormenting reel, fueling the fire within him. "Monoma." Izuku's voice erupted like a thunderclap, echoing through the night as he swiftly drew Apollyon, the blade gleaming ominously in the moonlight. Without hesitation, he charged forward, driven by an almost primal need to strike down the one he held responsible. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat synchronized with the rush of blood in his ears. But just as he was about to bring the sword down in a devastating arc, a dark figure moved in his path. Stain, still in his monstrous Nomu form, stepped between Izuku and Monoma, his bladed arms rising to meet the incoming attack. Metal clashed against metal, the sound sharp and jarring, as their weapons locked in a deadly embrace. Izuku's eyes, burning with hatred, met Stain's calm, almost mocking gaze. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that," Stain said, his voice unnervingly steady, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "Out of the way," Izuku snarled, his voice laced with venom as he pulled back his sword, ready for another strike. Stain mirrored his movement, his bladed arms retracting slightly before both lunged forward again. The clash was fierce and unrelenting, their weapons meeting with a force that reverberated through the ground beneath them. Sparks flew as steel met steel, each blow more desperate and powerful than the last. Mei stood frozen in shock, her eyes wide as the scene unfolded before her. Izuku clashed fiercely with Monoma, his movements sharp and unrelenting. But why? Why was he so furious? Mei's heart raced, her mind spinning with questions that had no answers. Her voice cracked as she shouted across the battlefield, desperation leaking into every word. "Izuku, what are you doing?" Mei cried out, her voice barely rising above the chaos. "It's Monoma. Stop. It's really him." She took a step forward, tears welling up in her eyes. This couldn't be happening. Monoma was supposed to be gone. He had vanished during the eclipse. Dead, everyone had said. How could he be here, now, alive? From the sidelines, Abara, watching Mei's frantic outburst, turned her head in confusion. "Mei," she asked cautiously, pointing toward the blonde boy who was locked in combat with Izuku. "Who is that?" "That's Monoma," Mei cried, her voice breaking with disbelief. "He's our friend. I thought he died during the eclipse." Hearing the words, Itsuka frowned and turned toward Mei, her brows knitted in confusion. "Wait, weren't Izuku and Toru the only survivors of the eclipse?" Mei hesitated, her throat tightening. She gave a shaky nod. "Why yeah," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. But Itsuka's gaze shifted to the blonde boy, her eyes narrowing in thought. If Monoma didn't die in the eclipse, then where has he been all this time? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications Mei couldn't ignore. Her lips parted, a retort on the tip of her tongue, but no words came out. Something deep within her, a gnawing feeling, made her pause. Where had Monoma been all these years? Why was he only now resurfacing? And more importantly, why was Izuku so enraged at him? Mei clenched her fists, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. The Monoma she knew, or thought she knew, couldn't possibly have done anything to warrant this kind of fury from Izuku. Could he? As her mind raced for answers, she felt the dread seep deeper into her bones. There was more to Monoma's return than she had anticipated, far more. And as she stood there, paralyzed by doubt, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything she thought she knew about that fateful eclipse was wrong. Izuku ducked under Stain's deadly blade, narrowly avoiding the slash aimed at his neck. With swift precision, he swung his sword, Apollyon, the steel gleaming with a fierce light as it cleaved through Stain's body. The hero killer let out a guttural growl of pain as he was split in two, his torso hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Even as he fell, his body began to knit itself back together, though at a slower pace than before. "Damn it, I wasted too much energy fighting that man," Stain thought bitterly, watching his regeneration falter as exhaustion took hold. With Stain temporarily incapacitated, Izuku didn't waste a second. His gaze snapped to Monoma, standing a few meters away, eerily calm amidst the chaos. Without hesitation, Izuku surged forward, sword raised high, ready to strike. But before he could reach his target, an invisible force slammed into him, freezing him mid-charge. He was hurled backward as if struck by a colossal hand, crashing into the trunk of a tree with a force that rattled the air around them. Despite the blow, Izuku recovered quickly, pushing himself to his feet, barely fazed by the impact. His eyes blazed with fury, his grip tightening on Apollyon as he fixed Monoma with a deadly glare. "What are you doing here, Monoma?" Izuku spat, his voice laced with venom. "Why are you standing there, acting like you're some kind of god?" Monoma stood unmoved, his posture relaxed, a calm expression on his face as if he were above the madness unfolding around him. His golden hair swayed slightly in the wind, and he met Izuku's fiery gaze with unnerving serenity. "I came here," to see if I would question my dream once again. His voice was soft but carried an unsettling weight. But it looks like I won't. Izuku's jaw clenched, the rage boiling inside him threatening to explode. Your dream, he growled, his voice thick with disbelief and anger. What about the dreams of our friends, Monoma? What about their dreams? At the mention of their fallen comrades, everyone turned to Monoma, confusion and suspicion mingling in their eyes. May, however, felt something deeper, a cold wave of fear and horror that crawled into her heart, making her hands tremble. What had happened to the Monoma they once knew? For a brief moment, Monoma's smile faltered. His eyes darkened as they met Izuku's once more, his previous calm demeanor replaced by something hollow. The only dreams that matter, he said, his voice unnervingly flat, are mine. Izuku's fury ignited like a wildfire, burning hotter than ever as he fixed his one good eye on the figure before him, the friend who had betrayed everything they had once fought for. His entire body trembled with rage, his heart pounding with the names of the fallen echoing in his mind. Bastard, Izuku roared, his voice raw with anger and grief. I'm gonna fucking kill you. I'm gonna send you straight to hell. For Kimihito. For Kanao. For Josuke. For Toru. His words were sharp, filled with the pain of every lost life, every sacrifice that had been made in vain. Without hesitation, he charged at Monoma once again, his sword raised high, ready to strike down the man who stood before him. But just like before, an invisible force slammed into him, halting his advance in an instant. He was violently hurled to the side, crashing into the wooden wall of the lodge with a deafening impact. The structure groaned under the force, splintering as Izuku's body hit it, leaving a gaping hole in its side. Izuku, May screamed, her voice cracking with fear as she saw him disappear into the debris. Monoma's gaze turned coldly toward the other students, who looked ready to leap into action, their faces etched with determination and anger. Tetsu clenched his fists, his body tense with the urge to fight, while Setsuna glared at Monoma, her teeth gritted in frustration. But before they could act, Monoma raised a hand, his expression unbothered by the chaos around him. Don't, he said, his voice calm yet commanding. It'll be a waste of time. Tetsu growled in frustration, his knuckles white as he restrained himself. Setsuna's lips curled in a snarl, but she too stayed her hand, knowing deep down that Monoma was right. They couldn't stop him, not yet. Monoma's gaze shifted, settling on May. His expression softened slightly, though the emptiness in his eyes remained. May, he began, his voice oddly gentle, when you learn the truth, you can decide if you hate me or not. May stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. What truth? What was he hiding? The questions burned in her mind, but before she could say anything, a portal opened behind Monoma, swirling like a black void. Without looking back, he raised his hand, and Stain's broken body floated toward him, the hero killer's form limp but slowly regenerating. As Stain's body reached him, Monoma took hold of the villain, then turned on his heel and stepped into the portal, disappearing into the night without another word. For a moment, the world felt eerily still, the tension hanging heavy in the air like a weight pressing down on May's chest. She stood frozen, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. What was Monoma planning? What did he mean by the truth? Shaking herself from her thoughts, May rushed over to the wreckage of the lodge, her heart pounding with worry. She saw Izuku stirring, his body battered but still moving, crawling out of the hole he had been thrown into. Dust and debris clung to his clothes, and blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, but his expression was the same, unyielding fury. Izuku, May cried, dropping to her knees beside him. Are you all right? Can you stand? Izuku growled as he staggered to his feet, his body aching but his mind consumed by one thought. I'm fine, he snapped, his voice sharp and tense. His eyes darted around wildly, searching the battlefield for any sign of Monoma. Where's Monoma? May, standing nearby, hesitated, her voice soft as she answered, he's gone. Izuku's expression twisted with rage, his fists clenching at his sides. Damn it, damn it, damn it, he shouted, each word louder than the last, his fury spilling over. His eyes scanned the area in vain, desperately trying to catch a glimpse of Monoma, but there was nothing, just emptiness. No trace of the boy he once knew, no sign of the battle that had just ended. With his frustration mounting, Izuku's anger erupted. He hurled his sword to the ground, the blade embedding itself into the dirt with a heavy thud. His knees buckled, and he collapsed, screaming into the night, his voice raw with grief and rage. "Fuck, fuck, fuck," he yelled, his fists pounding the earth as though it would answer his rage, his fury echoing in the stillness of the aftermath. Mei rushed to his side, her heart aching as she knelt beside him. "Izuku," she cried, her hands trembling as she reached out to him. "Izuku, calm down, please." Her voice cracked with fear, but there was something deeper too, an understanding of his pain. Izuku's breathing was ragged, each breath coming in heavy, uneven gasps. His body shook with the weight of his emotions, the storm within him slow to subside. But slowly, painfully, his breathing began to steady, his clenched fists loosening slightly as the raw edge of his fury dulled. He sat there, his chest heaving, staring at the ground, his mind a whirl of guilt and anger. Mei watched him carefully, her heart hammering in her chest, waiting for the right moment. She knew she had to ask the question that had been burning in her mind, the one she had been too afraid to voice until now. "Izuku," she began softly, her voice almost a whisper. "What happened with Monoma? What really happened during the eclipse?" Her eyes searched his face, worry etched into every line. Izuku's shoulders tensed, and for a moment, he didn't respond. Slowly, he turned his head toward her, his face no longer twisted in anger but in something else, something far more painful. His good eye glistened with unshed tears, his expression haunted, as if he had been carrying the weight of this secret for far too long. The truth would be finally told to her. Mei sat down beside Toru, her body tense, her hands curled into fists against her lap. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, but the sheer disbelief in it was deafening. "I can't believe this," she muttered, her breath hitching as she stared at Izuku. Then, her voice sharpened, her trembling hands clenching against her thighs. "Why didn't you tell me this? How could you keep something like that from me?" Izuku lowered his head, his expression shadowed with regret. His voice, when he spoke, was barely above a murmur, thick with guilt. "Mei, I didn't want to tell you, not after everything that already happened." Mei's breath hitched, and she let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh, her voice trembling with barely restrained emotion. "You didn't want to tell me," she echoed, her golden eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Izuku, I mourned for him. I mourned for the bastard who murdered all my friends. How do you think that makes me feel?" Her voice cracked as a tear slipped down her cheek, her hands balling into fists. Izuku flinched as if her words had physically struck him, his shoulders caving in, his expression twisting with pain. "I'm sorry, Mei." His voice was small, fragile, as if he knew it would never be enough. But Mei was already moving. She surged to her feet, grabbing his cloak in a tight, trembling grip, her fingers curling into the fabric with unrelenting force. "Sorry, sorry," she shrieked, shaking him. The dam inside her broke, raw anguish spilling from her like a flood. "Why you think you can just say sorry and that somehow makes up for all the lies?" Her breath came fast and uneven, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. "Mei, but he never got to finish." Mei's fist collided with his face before he could get another word out. The impact sent Izuku stumbling back, his head snapping to the side. A sharp, stinging pain bloomed across her knuckles, but she barely registered it over the rage boiling inside her. "Oh, son of, grr." She clenched her throbbing fist, shaking it out as her whole body trembled. Izuku exhaled sharply, bringing a hand to his cheek where her punch had landed. Then, despite the fresh pain, he looked back at her with something she couldn't quite place, understanding. "It hurts, doesn't it? That pain in your hand. That rage in your chest." His voice was low, steady, almost knowing. He took a step forward, his still working green eye dark with something deeper than sorrow. "It hurts like hell, Mei, and the worst part, it's all consuming." Mei's breath shuddered as she glared at him, her body shaking from the weight of it all. Around them, the others remained silent, listening, waiting, as if standing at the edge of a storm. Izuku let out a slow, unsteady breath, his fists clenching at his sides. His gaze locked onto Mei's, unwavering despite the raw fury still burning in her tear-filled eyes. There's a reason I didn't tell you. Why I couldn't tell you. His voice was quiet, but the weight behind it pressed against the air between them, heavy with something unspoken. It's because of what you're feeling right now. May's breath was ragged, her body trembling, but she remained silent, listening. That anger, that pain, that urge to break something, to hurt someone, Izuku exhaled sharply, his eyes dark with something deeper than regret. I've felt it for a whole year, May, and I still feel it. Even now, and do you know what it's cost me? Everything. The word hung between them like an open wound. This dark flame inside me, it won't go out, it's devoured who I used to be. Hell, I can hardly recognize myself anymore. I can hardly be a decent person anymore, Izuku admitted. His throat tightened as his gaze flickered toward the others, his classmates, his new friends, though he wasn't sure if he deserved to call them that at all. I've pushed them away, I've hurt them, I can barely call them my classmates because of what I've done. His voice cracked, and for the first time, something flickered in May's expression, something that wasn't just rage. That feeling inside you right now, that's what it's cost me. He looked at her, his expression unguarded, open. And if you had known from the start, May, if you had carried this burden like I have, it would have eaten you alive, it would have burned away everything that makes you, you. And I couldn't let that happen, Izuku said, swallowing a sob back. Silence. May stood there, frozen, her breath uneven as tears streaked down her face. She still wanted to be angry, wanted to scream, to hit him again, but the fire inside her was flickering, weakening under the weight of what he had just said. Her knees gave out, she collapsed onto the floor, her shoulders shaking as sobs tore through her. She clenched her arms around herself, her anger crumbling into something far more painful, grief. Abara was at her side in an instant, lowering herself beside her and wrapping her in a firm, grounding embrace. Her vines curled gently around May's back, as if trying to shield her from the weight of the truth. Toru, though unable to fully understand what had just happened, crouched beside them, holding onto May tightly, her arms wrapped around her as if she could keep her from breaking apart completely. Izuku stood there, watching the girl he had tried to protect shatter in front of him. And for the first time, he didn't know if he had truly saved her, or just delayed the inevitable. As Abara and Toru continued to comfort the sobbing May, their quiet reassurances filling the heavy silence, Itsuka approached Izuku. He sensed her presence before he turned to face her, his expression weary but composed. The weight of everything that had just transpired lingered in his eyes. Heroes are on their way back, she informed him, crossing her arms. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, something between frustration and concern. Should we tell them about that Monoma guy? Izuku exhaled sharply, running a hand through his unruly hair before shaking his head. We'll tell Guts, he'll know what to do. Itsuka frowned. Guts. Izuku nodded. Yeah, he's got friends in high places, they'll figure something out. Itsuka studied him for a moment before shifting her weight slightly. And what about us? She asked. No offense, Izuku, but we're involved in this whole thing now. We can't just be left in the dark anymore, we need to know what you know. Her words weren't accusatory, but there was a firm expectation in them. Izuku met her gaze, understanding the truth in what she was saying. I know, I've already told you pretty much everything I know, but when Guts gets back, we'll have him fill you in on some of the finer details. He glanced toward the others, his shoulders tense. For now, we follow his orders, and he's been telling me the same things since I first stepped into UA. Itsuka raised an eyebrow. Which is? Izuku's lips quirked slightly, but it wasn't amusement, it was something far more cynical. Act like normal students, well, for the most part. Itsuka's frown deepened. That's not exactly reassuring. Izuku sighed. Those freaks already know I'm after them. His emerald eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. And now, they might know you guys are joining me. A beat of silence stretched between them before Itsuka let out a slow breath, rolling her shoulders. So now we might be targets too? She asked, her voice level, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, determination, maybe. Most likely, Izuku admitted, rubbing the back of his neck as his gaze drifted toward the distant city lights. But to be honest, I don't think they'll bother trying anything against us, not directly, anyway. Itsuka tilted her head, arms still crossed. And why's that? Izuku let out a slow breath, his hands slipping into his pockets. No matter how many of their little Nomu I take down, no matter how many times I've tried to stop whatever plan they're setting in motion, they barely acknowledge me. His eyes darkened, his voice laced with something unreadable. It's like they don't see me as a real threat, just some annoying fly buzzing around their heads, a nuisance, nothing more. Itsuka studied him carefully, noting the frustration in his tone. There was a bitterness there, one he probably didn't even realize had seeped into his words. Well, she said, shifting her stance, at least we have that going for us. If they don't see us as a real problem, that could actually be an advantage, makes it easier to move without drawing too much attention. Izuku nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe. A moment of silence passed between them, the distant sounds of the others murmuring softly behind them. The night air was thick with the scent of scorched concrete and lingering tension. Well, Itsuka exhaled, rolling her shoulders before looking back at the scene before them. We should check on the civilians, make sure they're okay and figure out where they came from. That way, we can let the heroes know where to take them once they've given their statements to the police. Izuku hesitated, staring down at his hands for a moment before stuffing them deeper into his pockets. You go ahead, I need to clear my head for a bit. Itsuka glanced at him, her expression unreadable at first. Then, she gave a small nod. No problem. She turned to leave, but after only a few steps, she paused. Izuku. He looked up, his tired green eyes meeting hers. Yeah? Her lips pressed into a thin line before she spoke. You're our classmate, our friend. Whether you believe it or not, her voice was firm, unwavering. You just need to open up a little more, okay? Izuku parted his lips slightly, as if he was going to say something, tell her he'd try, maybe, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, after a beat, he gave a small nod. I'll do that, he said, and though the promise was hesitant, there was something genuine in his voice. Itsuka gave him a small, knowing smile, the kind that held both warmth and understanding. Good, she said simply, as if that one word carried all the faith she had in him. Then, without hesitation, she turned and strode back toward the others, seamlessly slipping into the efforts to aid the civilians. Izuku watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned on his heel and walked away, his movements slow but deliberate. He moved carefully, slipping beyond the reach of flickering emergency lights and hushed voices. The further he went, the quieter everything became, until the distant chatter of his classmates faded into nothing. He didn't look back. But someone was watching. Abara's eyes followed him as he rounded a corner and disappeared into the shadowed tree line of the nearby forest. The way he moved, head slightly lowered, shoulders tense, spoke of a weight far heavier than anything physical. She remained still, her vines curling slightly at her sides, debating whether she should follow. She didn't call out to him, didn't stop him, but as Izuku vanished into the darkness, she whispered a quiet prayer, not for herself, but for him. After a while, Guts arrived at the Pussycats' cabin, his boots crunching against the gravel path as he took in the scene before him. The place was buzzing with activity. Civilians sat on makeshift benches or leaned against trees, their faces weary but relieved. Pro-heroes and law enforcement moved among them, questioning each one before escorting them back to whatever lives they had left, back to the families that had likely spent agonizing days or even years waiting for their return. He exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders to ease the lingering stiffness in his muscles. Another battle behind him, another mess cleaned up, but the weight in his chest never seemed to lighten. It's been a long time, Mr. Swordsman. The voice was smooth, familiar. Guts turned his head sharply, hand instinctively hovering near the hilt of his weapon before his gaze settled on the speaker. Standing a few feet away, arms casually crossed, was Luca. His brows lifted slightly. He hadn't expected to see her of all people here. He hadn't seen her in years, but the moment he laid eyes on her, recognition hit him like a memory dragged up from the depths of an old wound. I remember you, Guts said, his voice low, measured. Luca chuckled, shifting her weight slightly. Glad you do. Her sharp eyes gleamed with amusement. How long's it been since we last saw each other? A decade? Maybe more? Guts let out a quiet grunt. Something like that. Luca hummed thoughtfully before smirking. I think the last time we crossed paths, You saved my sisters and me from that thing back in Germany. Yeah, that's right, he muttered, nodding. His voice took on a softer edge as he added, and back then, you and the others were helping take care of Casca. Luca's smirk faded, replaced by something more solemn. I never did thank you properly for that, he said. Luca waved a dismissive hand, offering a small smile. No biggie, she was important to you. Then, Luca tilted her head slightly, her expression turning more curious. How is she these days? At the question, Guts stiffened. Just a fraction, but enough for someone as observant as Luca to notice. His hand clenched at his side before he forced himself to relax, exhaling through his nose. She passed away quite some time ago. Hearing the words, Luca's expression softened with sorrow. She let out a quiet breath before saying, I'm sorry. Guts met her gaze, his own eyes heavy with something distant yet resolute. It's all right, he said, his voice steady but quiet. She had her peace for a long time. I made sure of that. There was a finality in his tone, one that spoke of years spent ensuring that peace, of battles fought and wounds carried so that Casca could live without fear, at least for a little while. Luca nodded slowly, taking comfort in knowing that the girl she and her sisters had once cared for had found solace in her last years. Even so, the weight of loss never truly faded. She let out a breath, then asked, What brings you back to Japan? Same reason he's here, Guts replied, nodding past her. Curious, Luca turned to follow his gaze. Her eyes landed on Izuku, watching as he stood a short distance away, his posture more relaxed than usual as he observed Toru playing with both Mei and Kota. A brief, almost wistful smile crossed his face, though there was still something guarded about him. Like someone waiting for the moment peace would inevitably be shattered. You know Izuku? She asked, raising a brow. Guts nodded. Yeah, you do too? Luca exhaled, folding her arms. He's friends with my niece, she. Her voice wavered slightly before she steadied herself. She's the other survivor. At that, Guts's expression shifted. His gaze darkened with understanding, and after a moment, he said quietly, I'm sorry. Luca let out a short, humorless chuckle, shaking her head. It's fine. I'm managing as best as I can. But the frustration in her voice was unmistakable. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, her jaw clenching. Though, now I don't know what to do. Those bastards found us, kidnapped me, took her, too, they know where we live now. Her voice trembled with restrained fury, her body taut with barely contained rage. Guts could see it, the way her breaths came a little sharper, the way her shoulders tensed like she was fighting the urge to lash out at something, anything. You're worried they'll come again, he said, not as a question, but as a certainty. Luca swallowed hard, then nodded. Yeah, and this time, I don't think they'll stop at just taking prisoners. Guts's expression hardened with resolve as he met Luca's gaze. If you want, you and your niece can stay with me for the time being, he offered. His voice was steady, firm. They won't try anything as long as I'm around. Luca blinked, taken aback by the unexpected offer. You'd really do that for us? She asked, her voice laced with cautious hope. Guts gave a slow nod. It's the least I can do after what you did for Casca, and besides, it's the least I can do while Izuku's at UA. He'd worry too much about her if she wasn't somewhere safe. His tone darkened slightly. But with me watching over you too, he won't have to keep looking over his shoulder, wondering if she's in danger. He'll be able to focus on what he needs to do. Luca studied him for a long moment before a small, grateful smile tugged at her lips. I appreciate it, she said softly. Guts nodded again. Like I said, I owe you that much, he replied. Then, after a brief pause, he added, besides, I live close to UA. If she ever wants to visit, I can take her there. Luca chuckled, a lightness creeping into her voice despite the tension lingering in the air. I think she'd like that, she admitted. Mei doesn't come around as often as she used to. UA is keeping her busy, and Izuku. He hasn't seen her in a long time. Guts exhaled sharply, his gaze drifting toward Izuku in the distance. I know, he said, a hint of understanding in his tone. But I get why, he blames himself. Luca followed his gaze, her expression thoughtful. Yeah, I've seen it, even from here, it's written all over his face, she sighed, folding her arms. I just hope he stops before it's too late. He reminds me too much of you. I suppose he does. Guts said, his voice quieter now, almost reluctant to acknowledge the truth in her words. Luka nodded, her gaze lingering on Izuku as he stood at a distance, watching over Toru, Mei, and Kota with an intensity that never wavered. The way he looks now. The way he keeps his guard up, how his eyes never stop scanning the area. It's just like you when you found Ella. She caught herself, exhaling before correcting, Casca. Guts let out a slow, measured breath, his shoulders visibly tensing before he forced himself to relax. I figured as much, he admitted. The kid's too much like how I used to be. He let the thought hang in the air for a moment, then shook his head. But hopefully now, he realizes he doesn't have to do this alone. Luka glanced at him, reading something in his expression before shifting her gaze back to Izuku. Hopefully, she murmured, though there was uncertainty in her tone. They both knew all too well how hard it was to let go of that weight, how easy it was to carry it until it crushed you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.